We are live, Mayor. We're ready.
All right, thank you. Let me welcome everybody to the Roanoke City Organizational Meeting for July 6, 2020. And I will ask our clerk, Ms. Susie McCord, to please call the roll for our organizational meeting.
Ms. Osborne, Ms. Price,
Here.
Ms. White Boyd,
Here.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
and Mayor Lee.
Here. Thank you. Let me note that Council Member Osborne will not be in attendance today. And the number of members present by electronic communication means, and I want to declare that there is a quorum present as permitted by Amendment 28 to House Bill 29, Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708 as amended, and other applicable laws and ordinances. Today's council meeting will be televised live and replayed on RBTV Channel 3 on Thursday, July 9th at 7:00 p.m. and Saturday, July 11th at 4:00 p.m. and video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke VA. Council meetings are offered and closed with closed captioning for the hearing impaired. The purpose of today's meeting is that the city code requires that the first meeting of council in the month of July be referred to as the organizational meeting, at which time council will adopt a resolution establishing the days, times, and places of regular meetings to be held by the council during the fiscal year. All right. First item here is a resolution establishing a meeting schedule for the city council commencing July 1st, 2020 and terminating December 31st, 2020. There is a resolution.
Vice Mayor Cobb, I move the resolution.
Anita Price, second.
All right, Madam Clerk, could you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution establishing a meeting schedule for City Council for the first half of the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2020 and terminating December 31st, 2020.
All right, are there any questions or comments by members of council?
Mr. Mayor, Bill Bestfitch, if I might, I just wanted to remind us all that when council approved the rescheduling of municipal elections from May to November, we passed an ordinance that we would have this meeting and then 6 months from now have another organizational meeting at the first meeting in January for the second 6 months of the fiscal year. And we need to request a charter change from the General Assembly so that we don't have to continue to do this twice in the same year, but we can move it to just January following every municipal election from here on out. That requires a public hearing, which we're planning to do at the second meeting in November, which will be after the municipal election coming up this November. And I just also wanted to take the opportunity to say that if I'm permitted to continue chairing the legislative committee, I wanted to ask everybody to start thinking now. We probably won't have the first meeting of the committee until September, probably the first Monday in September. But begin thinking now, begin talking to folks in your spheres of influence about ideas that we might want to consider for inclusion in our legislative agenda for the 2021 session. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. And so noted, Ms. Bestfitch. Are there any other further questions or comments by members of council? Hearing none, I'll ask clerk to please call the roll.
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 6-0 and the resolution passes. All right. There being no further business to come before the council, the organizational meeting is adjourned. But everybody keep the seats. The organizational meeting is adjourned. All right. That's probably been the shortest meeting on record there. All right, welcome everybody again to the Roanoke City Council chambers for our regular meeting on July the 6th, 2020. I'll ask our clerk, Miss Stephanie, ask our clerk, Miss Susan McCord, to please call the roll.
Ms. Osborne, Ms. Price,
Here.
Ms. White Boyd,
Here.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
and Mayor Lee.
Here, and a quorum is present. Thank you. All right, we will have an invocation followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll ask everybody to join me in a word of prayer. Eternal God, our Father, we come to you thanking you for this day that you have given us, and thanking you, Lord, for we recognize that all of our blessings that we have, and we have many, is because of you. And we thank you for that. And Lord, we thank you as we just celebrated an Independence Day. And we ask, Lord, that you continue to guide and direct us as we come together as a country and as a community. We ask your blessings on those who are sick and shut in, and those in our community who are bereaving. We ask you to strengthen and encourage them and let them know that you still have everything under control. And we give you praise and we give you honor. And Lord, we love you today. It is in your son's name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of
of
the
the United States of America and to the republic
For which is
for which it stands,
one
one nation, under
God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. I trust that everybody had a good holiday, July 4th weekend, and you got the rest that you need because we got a busy week ahead. So, and I want to thank all of you for all the things that you do to make this community a special community, each and every one of you. All right, today's council meeting will be televised live and replayed on RBTV Channel 3 on Thursday, July 9th at 7 p.m. and Saturday, July 11th at 4 o'clock p.m. and video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/RoanokeVA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the hearing impaired. Each member of council has access through the Zoom meeting platform and can participate in this proceeding. The city has provided the public with information to allow the public access to observe this regular session through live broadcast on RBTV, live streaming on Facebook and posted on YouTube. The city has provided notice of this agenda and process to the public on Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. City staff, including the city manager, city clerk, city attorney, and technical staff, are present in the council chamber and are participating in this regular session. To facilitate the process today, to ensure that all council members and the public can follow these proceedings, I ask that whenever a member speaks, including making a motion, to first state the member's name, then make the motion or second. At this time, I ask members of council whether they have any questions about this process. If not, I ask the city manager, does he have any questions, or advise if he has any comments? All right, then we'll move down to item number 2, which is presentations and acknowledgements. We have none. And item number 3 is a hearing of citizens upon public matters. City Council sets this time as a priority for citizens to be heard. All matters will be referred to the city manager for response, recommendation, or report to council as he may deem appropriate. Based upon Executive Order number 51 issued by Governor Northam on March 12, 2020, certain other executive orders, amendments 28 to House Bill 29, Chapter 1283, Virginia Acts of Assembly, Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2, and other laws and ordinances, City Council will be conducting this regular session of City Council by electronic communication means without a quorum of City Council physically present in council chambers and without the presence of members of the public in the City Council chambers. In order to afford citizens an opportunity to provide comments to City Council during the COVID-19 pandemic disaster, citizens wishing to address the council during this regular session of City Council conducted by electronic communication means were instructed to sign up by emailing or by calling the city's clerk's office at clerk@roanoke.va.gov and by phone at 853-2541, area code 540. And they had to do that by 12 p.m. today, July 6th. Those citizens have signed up to speak before the council have been provided the Zoom meeting information and will be allowed to join the meeting and address City Council by electronic communication means. And at this time, I will ask our clerk, are there any citizens signed to speak today?
Yes, we have 4 speakers, and they will be speaking by Zoom.
Okay.
The first speaker is Ed Sparrow.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Sparrow.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. My name is Ed Sparrow, and I am the president of Greater Southwest Athletic Association. I have been involved with GSA for over 20 years as a parent, a coach, athletic director, and board member. I am here today to ask City Council to intervene in the Parks and Recreation's decision to walk away from youth athletics. With the support of Parks and Rec, 22,000 children in Roanoke City are given the opportunity to participate in organized team sports. Participation in athletics exposes children to developmental benefits such as self-confidence, physical well-being, social development, communication skills, and responsibility. The Parks and Recreation Department has been vital in the administration of the youth sports leagues in Roanoke City, and we need that support to continue. $80,445. That is the amount that is being saved out of a $298 million budget. That is less than 0.1% of the city's budget. That is a direct benefit to the children of Roanoke City. Why is the Parks and Rec support so important to our rec clubs? The rec clubs collect money from registration and use that money for equipment, uniforms, insurance, and advertising. We also discount or completely waive fees for families that cannot afford to pay. For some rec clubs, that is 50 to 75% of their participants. If we have to increase fees, it will further burden those families and take away their ability to participate, all 0.1% of the city's budget. The administrative functions they provide are equally as important to our partnership with Parks and Rec. They mediate between us and the schools for fields and gyms. Without their help, I am afraid we will not have enough fields to support 35 baseball and softball teams or enough gyms to support 70 basketball teams for practices and games. The city owns one gym, so it would be impossible to share it between 70 different teams. We need support from Parks and Rec, and once again, I ask you for your support to save youth athletics in Roanoke City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers that will be speaking to this issue?
No, they're all different issues.
All right. I want to ask our city manager if he would at this time address the issue brought forth by Mr. Sparrow. I think there's some misunderstanding about what has taken place in our city with regards to recreation and athletics.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll really address one point just because I think it's the one that needs the greatest amount of clarity, and then answer any questions that you all might have. And that deals with the city's involvement in securing facilities, which include gyms and fields. And even though the budget reduction removes the city's role from administering the projects or administering the recreation programs, as was indicated in the correspondence that went to each of the rec clubs, the city would still maintain a role in helping secure at no cost the fields and the facilities that are necessary for the clubs themselves to be able to participate. There have actually been a number of discussions actually with the school administration about that, and they were in agreement at that point in time. Now, obviously, there has been turnover in their administration, so we'll have to pick those conversations back up again. But that is the expectation. The unknown, of course, is when those facilities might become available to anyone, including us, as a result of the current restrictions tied to COVID. But I know that was one of the items where there was a significant amount of concern, just even being able to overcome that I wanted to clarify with that. And again, happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of the other items that were raised in the discussion or in the presentation.
Thank you. Members of council, is there any of the questions that you would like to discuss with the manager regarding Mr. Sparrow's concerns?
I think Ms. Price had her hand up first.
She's not on my screen anymore.
Uh-oh.
We still
All
see
right.
you.
I do recognize Ms. Price. I do that, but she's not on my screen.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. This certainly is a very important issue, and one that we all feel very strongly about, because of course, we want to do what we can to not only support our youth and our children, but also the youth athletics. So I guess I have two questions, Mr. Kyle. At some point, I'm sure we can't do it today, but at some point, I think this would be an opportunity for us to examine just what is current status of youth athletics. What can we do to support our programs, and perhaps even take this opportunity to make an assessment of what are the needs, what can we as a city do to support our athletics. I think most of us are very aware that youth athletics has been in disarray for quite some time. And I know in talking with Mr. Cowell earlier that the YAC committee, Youth Athletics, I think that's what it stands for, Youth Athletics Committee or Council, that is not really functioning right now. And that worries me because we don't really have a good line of communication for all of our rec clubs and teams. So I just want to put that on the table, that I think at some point in time, we really need to have a good, hard look at, make an assessment, and what can we do moving forward.
Yeah, and I would present kind of probably two opportunities for that coming up, because again, there are two different issues or two different topics here, one being budget related and the other just being the whole program and the way in which youth athletics are actually conducted here in the city. So the two opportunities, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board has already indicated an interest in picking up this item and talking about it at their upcoming meetings. So that'll be one area where I think this is discussed, which again will be helpful for you all for the second piece, which is, as you all know, we'll be talking in our strategic plan retreat in August about all of the strategies that we use in the city, and certainly the way in which the city provides or supports or doesn't support youth sports and youth recreation will be an obvious topic for that as well. So hopefully the PRAB will have some of that conversation prior to that and be able to provide some additional thoughts. So I would put those as two points in the upcoming near future as we move forward. Obviously that doesn't address the immediate budget related issues, but again, in terms of some of the facilities, I don't know that the facilities such as the gyms at the schools are actually going to open anytime soon as well. I don't, those conversations haven't been had. Obviously soccer fields will be available and some others, but those would be two time frames that I would present that ought to be able to be available to help with that.
All right, Mr. Bestfitch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess just to follow up on that last point that Mr. Cowell just made, I'm really not so sure that we should be rushing into any youth athletic activities that involve very close contact among a group of children, of athletes. This situation is not getting better. We're approaching 500 cases in the city of Roanoke, and we're not seeing improvement. And along with that, we're seeing a decrease in the average age of people being infected with this coronavirus, which means that a lot of the age group that I'm hearing about now would be right in with the parents of these children. The children, nobody spreads this around deliberately, obviously, but you don't know most of the time when you've been in contact with the virus until quite a few days later. And that means that the virus can be transmitted before a person is showing any symptoms or feels ill in any way at all. And we don't want some kids picking it up and then going back and grandma and grandpa get infected and all the rest of that. So I just, we had planned for this meeting to be back in the chamber again. And we put that off for another couple of weeks. And I'm not sure we're going to be ready 2 weeks from now. We'll see. Maybe we are. I hope we can. I hope this whole thing gets over very soon. But in the meantime, the other question that I would ask of Mr. Cowell is if he could provide us, again, as Ms. Price said, not today, but to send us an itemization of the $80,000 that we're talking about. What was in the budget in the first place that was an offer from Parks and Rec as to how they would use that $80,000 in funding that was removed. And I think that will put us in a much better position to look at what may be possible when it is appropriate for any youth athletics to begin again. But I'm sorry, I hate it. A lot of our plans have been put on hold for my wife and me personally, and we can't wait to get back to a lot of our activities, but we're not going to do it until we feel like it's going to be safe for everybody. Thank you.
And I will forward that information to the council. I do have it, so I'll go ahead and let you know what it is right now and then forward it to you so you have it. So there were 5 items that were covered under that $80,000. 23,000 of it roughly was for part-time salaries that are used to assist in those efforts. 12,000 for security, 39,000 went to paying for officials, 2,000 went for background checks, and $4,300 went for general supplies. And those were things like metals and just basic equipment. Those are the 5 categories. And again, I'll forward that to you also. You have the exact amounts. And of the last full year of athletics that we had, there were roughly 2,000 youth that participated across the board. And 54% of those came from one single rec club, which is the club that you heard from today, which is GSA.
All right. Any other comments or questions by members of council on this subject?
Mr. Mayor?
Cobbs?
Yes, thank you. Bob, just a follow-up question. In addition to that information, could we get some context? Being on council for 2 years, I don't fully know a lot of the history of youth athletics in the city. I understand that there were conversations several years ago about Parks and Rec having an even more of a leadership role in conversation with some of our athletic clubs, and that was not supported. And so now it sounds like there's more support for that. I'd like to know some context for that. I'm grateful that Parks and Rec Advisory Board is willing to have these conversations initially, because I think everybody's right. Ms. Price, strategically, what are we doing to support youth athletics? What are we doing programmatically? What can be done to support existing athletic clubs? What can be done in partnership? And are there opportunities that we haven't yet explored that might be private-public partnerships? I would also just add that, many departments experienced and are struggling with the adjustments that have had to be made in the budget. And I appreciate the emails and calls that have come regarding this issue. And I know that this is true for probably a majority of the reductions that had to be made. So I want to keep that in context too. We've had to make these because of the revenue adjustments, primarily because of COVID-19. And we're still trying to figure out ways to move forward in that. So I'm grateful that we're having these conversations and grateful that we can be adaptable and strategic as we're dealing with a lot of unknowns. So if all of that is to say, Bob, if there's a way to provide some historical context, and I'd welcome that from the athletic clubs too, just so I think we all have a little better understanding of what that relationship has been like historically and what it might look like going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I think, any more comments? I know that we can, when we get together for our strategic planning meeting in August, I think that will be a good opportunity because there is a lot of history regarding this. And I think that several members of council can go back and share with the vice mayor where we've been, where we tried to go. I think that's a very, that's a lot of information there. So I think,
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Davis did have her hand up as well. So.
And Ms. White, go ahead.
Yep.
Oh, Ms. Whiteboard, I can't see until the camera goes. They're not on my, somehow they're not on my screen. But I do want to recognize Ms. Whiteboard. But Bob, just finishing my statement in terms of that's something that we possibly could do as we go down the line and look and come together in August to talk about that, especially this sports piece, because as you know, the time that you've been here, there's been something that we've had to grapple with because you got a lot of different players, a lot of different personalities, and we've been really all over the board on that. But I look forward to getting back and discussing that even further. This time I'll recognize Ms. Trish Whiteboard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is really for Mr. Sparrow, but before I ask the question, I would like to echo what Mr. Bestpitch said. We hope that we are in a predicament to even carry on with these sports, because with the current climate now, until we can mitigate the virus, I'm not really sure how much we can do, but we can start thinking ahead, and I'm glad we're doing that. My question to Mr. Sparrow, if he is still on, Mr. Cowell has indicated that the city is going to assist or help facilitate as best they can, acquiring the football fields and the gyms, and I'm sure they will do the very best they can. Can you tell me what would be the immediate need? Because from my understanding from the conversations that I've had is that you would be cut out of the referees and the scorekeepers and things like that. And we were hoping that perhaps we could get volunteers, or you could get volunteers for that. But aside from that, what would be the immediate need for the clubs if we're in a predicament to even go forward with these sports?
Right. Right now, our immediate need is we're trying to get signups going for soccer. And I know with the coronavirus, it's something that we have to be prepared for anything to happen that way, whether it gets better or gets worse. I've already tried to acquire fields for soccer practices in case we're able to start at the beginning of August. The city schools have already denied that request. Even though that the high schools are practicing football and soccer and other sports, we're not allowed to use their soccer fields. And then in the wintertime, we will have volleyball and basketball starting up, as long as the coronavirus is taken care of. As far as the officials and scorekeepers and stuff like that, we can find volunteers for at least the scorekeepers. And as far as the officials, there's been a lot of support from the community, and I'm sure that we can find a way to pay for the officials, at least for the next few seasons of sports, or for a few sports like soccer and basketball.
So the main issue would be getting some assistance trying to acquire the fields and the courts and things like that, which is actually up to the school and the superintendent and that administration. But I have every confidence in Mr. Cowell when he says that they are going to try to work with them as best they can to facilitate that. I think that we should be okay. Granted, we're able to go forward in the fall. I think, we're all trying to be optimistic, but these numbers are not looking very good right now. But I think we should be okay if that's the main problem that you're having. And Mr. Cowell has already addressed that.
Well, I hope so. We've always been told in the past that the city schools didn't want us there. And I've never even been allowed to put signs out on the school properties to advertise that we are having signups or anything. We've never had a great relationship. But
I think that might change. I think we'll do better on that end. I think we should be okay. And thank you for bringing this to our attention. But I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I would just echo those same comments. We ourselves have had challenges in getting access to the school facilities, and hope that with time will actually improve for whoever it is that is seeking those. And certainly, if the fields are available, meaning that the school is actually allowing anyone to use those, we will continue to work with the clubs in trying to secure those locations. If soccer is the first sport that's going to move, we'll do what we can to try to secure those if they're making field available.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Davis, Yeah, Ms. Davis still had her hand.
I don't even see her on my screen. Ms. Davis, you go ahead and speak, please.
Hey, Mayor Lee, I was just going to say real quick too, if you're on a laptop, you can change your view in the upper right-hand corner. And if you're on your iPad, all you have to do is swipe your screen.
All right, I hope so. I hope I don't swipe it and lose everybody here.
And that's
But
the group
I
here.
got you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, really to reiterate what Bob Cal said, which is that I'm very concerned. I think that there have been issues with equity within our youth sports for a long time. When I came on council 4 years ago, that was one of the prevalent issues and conversations that was taking place. And so I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity with this focus on equity and looking at the systems and processes that we have in place throughout the city. As Mr. Cal alluded to, they'll have an opportunity to look at youth sports as well. I know I've received calls, you know, my daughter's age group and demographic are the ones that are being recruited for youth sports. And I've got a lot of parents that are friends that are really upset and have been talking to a lot of those folks about what this looks like moving forward with youth sports. So I'm grateful we'll have the chance to look at this from a holistic angle and viewpoint. It's not just about the funding, but it's also making sure that all kids across the city have access to the same quality of youth sports and the same opportunities. And so if this conversation gives us the opportunity to create a more equal playing field, literal playing field for all of our kids across the city, then I'm glad that we will have been able to have this conversation. I appreciate Mr. Sparrow calling in and bringing this again to our attention. I think we've all received a lot of emails about this. And while it is in the hands of Parks and Rec, I'm glad that we'll have the chance as council to hopefully help lead and guide some decisions throughout this city that will create that you know, the opportunity for all of our kids to participate when we are able to reopen and offer those athletic opportunities again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cal. Madam Clerk, can you call the second speaker?
Yes, the second speaker is Whitney Leeson.
Hello, Mayor Lee and members of City Council.
Oh,
I've sent a letter via email to the clerk with just some comments from the Roanoke Valley Preservation Foundation. I'm the current president and I'm submitting this letter on behalf of the board. It's in reference to the upcoming conversation at your next council meeting regarding the Confederate Memorial in Lee Plaza. So if it's okay, I'd like to take a minute or two to read it. The Roanoke Valley Preservation Foundation believes that historic preservation can play a powerful role in telling the full story of our history in a truthful and inclusive manner. It is, however, a history that includes painful circumstances and difficult stories. It's imperative we understand how a one-dimensional retelling of our past history has resulted in a contemporary society where structural racism exists, as evidenced by systematic inequities in criminal justice, employment, education, housing, healthcare, political representation, and I'm sure there are other areas. As the recent protests and Black Lives Matter movement demonstrate, a number of people view Confederate monuments as a celebration of lost cause mythology. They decry the fact that these monuments serve as a rallying point for the bigotry and hatred promoted by neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, and other white supremacist groups. As you're well aware, I know Governor Northam has signed the Confederate Monuments Bill, Senate Bill 183, House Bill 1537, and effective July 1st, facilities are authorized to remove, relocate, or contextualize Confederate monuments as they see fit and their communities see fit. Now is the time to address the location of the monuments in the public spaces, and it's our responsibility to advocate on behalf of a history that contributes to a more equitable, just, and inclusive future for all residents of Roanoke City. I direct your attention to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They've developed an informative website that provides helpful guidance and resources for addressing this difficult issue. We encourage all leaders and concerned citizens to visit this site. I've listed this site for you in the letter. The Board of Trustees of RVPF has adopted the National Trust for Historic Preservation's position on Confederate monuments. as cited in this excerpt. And I'm going to read just an excerpt. We believe it is past time for us as a nation to acknowledge that these symbols do not reflect and are in fact abhorrent to our values and to our foundational obligation to continue building a more perfect union that embodies equality and justice for all. We believe that removal may be necessary to achieve the greater good of ensuring racial justice and equality. Although Confederate monuments are sometimes designated as historic, and while many were erected more than a century ago, the National Trust supports their removal from our public spaces when they continue to serve the purposes for which many were built, to glorify, promote, and reinforce white supremacy overtly or implicitly. While some have suggested removal may result in erasing history, we believe that removal may be necessary to achieve the greater good of ensuring racial justice and equality, and their history needs not end with that removal. We support relocation of these monuments to museums or other places where they may be preserved so that their history as elements of Jim Crow and racial injustice can be recognized and interpreted. That's from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. RVPF encourages the City of Roanoke to consider carefully each Confederate monument in order to fully understand its original purpose as well as its potential to contribute to the full narrative of our shared history. While it is important to erase the false narrative and racist ideology these monuments represent to many, the history they represent can be valuable in expanding our own myopic view of the past when accurately interpreted within a full context. RVPF firmly believes these monuments can be located in appropriate educational settings and provided with an historical context that openly discusses the original message and purpose of the monument, as well as the current social justice monument, a movement that has demanded their removal and relocation. Additionally, it is essential this narrative recognize the important role African Americans, Native Americans, and other underrepresented people have played in our history and the contributions made to our nation. We encourage City Council to work with local museums, historical organizations, and community groups to determine the best treatment of these monuments so that they can help us to the reality of the painful past, invite reconciliation for the present, and create a future free from discrimination. We encourage the city to form a committee to evaluate judiciously all options, including the possibility of relocating the Robert E. Lee Monument from Lee Plaza to an appropriate location with a Civil War connection. And I just list here a few possibilities: Evergreen Memorial, another cemetery with Civil War connections and dead. There are several: Hanging Mark Battlefield, Appomattox Courthouse, etc. Or a museum who's interested in developing an interpretive history exhibit exploring the legacies of slavery. RVPF offers our support to the city and its citizens as we seek a meaningful, truthful, and inclusive solution to this important and difficult issue. Thanks.
Thank you. And we will be having a public hearing on that item in the next
Yes, we talked about that, and we're certainly aware of that. We're just hoping that there's some forethought ahead of time of that meeting so that you have other individuals there to gather information, figure out who your primary stakeholders are who are going to participate in the conversation. But I think it probably helps do a little bit of groundwork ahead of time.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker, number 3, is John Woolrine.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor Lee and the Roanoke Council. I want to speak about the Lee Memorial also. Our request is that you leave that memorial for now. It has been there 60 years. It seems appropriate to leave it there at least 6 more months to allow emotions to mellow a bit, to make a better decision. If the memorial is promptly removed, there may be unintended consequences, which is always the expectation. There shall be demands to remove the name of President Woodrow Wilson from the World War I memorial. His legacy, as you know now, is is not what it once was. There'll be demands to remove his name. Someone better be prepared to maybe sandblast the World War I memorial. In a future decade, there may be demands to remove the statue for Dr. Martin Luther King. I hope not. I heard him speak in the March of 1965. I want him to be there. I want the statue there. There may be demands to remove that, and someone may say, well, he never came to Roanoke, and back in 2020 they took down the memorial for Ali. So maybe now that seems rather strange to us and far-fetched, but I mean nothing surprises me now. I would suggest that we leave this memorial and let it be there for at least 6 months. It's been there 60 years. It won't hurt to leave it there half of one more, to give us an opportunity to reflect on this in a less emotional. It is not about defending Lee's legacy. It's about the unintended consequence of a monument removal, which we're undergoing now across the U.S. And since there's no statue, most people don't even know it's there, and few see it when they walk downtown. And it is a modest memorial that I think should remain at least for the next 6 months. That is my request. I thank you, Mayor, and the council for this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woolwine.
Okay.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Our last speaker is Frida Cathcart.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me
I can.
okay? Okay, great. I appreciate this time. And I'm aware that there's going to be a hearing in August about the Lee Memorial. But I wanted to take this moment to address council moving into that time period as a time of contemplation and about how we can do so in a mindful and unified way. I am from a family that revered Robert E. Lee, and I have ancestors that fought on both sides of the Civil War. And when it comes to the Lee Memorial and the plaza in Roanoke, it is disrespectful to Lee's memory. Lee himself wrote that, in quotes, "My conviction is that however grateful it would be to the feelings of the South, the attempt in the present condition of the country would have the effect of retarding instead of accelerating its accomplishment, and of continuing, if not adding to, the difficulties under which the Southern people labor." He went on to express how, when he studied history at West Point, that he was aware that visible signs of civil war, when they raised visible signs of civil war, that the people recovered quicker from those conflicts. And he was worried that by keeping symbols alive, it would keep the divisions alive. Another quote of his was, after the war was over, "All should unite in honest efforts to liberate the effects of war and to restore the blessings of peace." And I wanted to bring to the council's attention that Roanoke does not have a memorial for peace. While we honor those that have given the ultimate sacrifice of protecting our nation so that we may live in peace, we don't have a memorial for peace. And I would like councils to consider that this may be the time and place to have a memorial and a plaza that honors peace. In closing, I would like to quote from the Bible, Ecclesiastics. "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I wish for the people of Roanoke a time for peace, of healing, and of unification. And I give thanks to this council for considering the work that needs to be done to honor Robert E. Lee's memory by removing the memorial and renaming the plaza in a way that heals our city and our country. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Catcon. That concludes all of the speakers that have signed up to be heard today. And all of your comments will be forwarded to our city manager, and he will respond as the situation dictates. Let's go now to item number 4 on our agenda today, which is the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by members of City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussions of items. And if discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. There is one request for the closed meeting from the mayor requesting that council convene in a closed meeting by electronic communication means to discuss vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as amended. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Ms. Whiteboy. Ms. Whiteboy, second.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the consent agenda is approved. We're now down to item number 5, which is public hearings. We have none. Item number 6 is petitions and communications. 6A is a communication from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office recommending acceptance of the Victims Witness Program grant from the Department of Criminal Justice Services in accordance with the Virginia Crime Victim and Witness Rights Act, and a communication from the city manager concurring in the recommendation. Their first is a resolution.
Bill Bestfitch, I move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The second?
Ms. Whiteboy, I second.
All right, I'll ask clerk to please read the title paragraph.
A resolution authorizing acceptance of a Victim Witness Assistance Program grant from the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services and authorizing execution of any required documentation on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions by members of council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could, we usually accept these grants very routinely without a lot of comment or discussion, and that's been fine. Recently, we've heard from a lot of citizens about how much money we spend on the police and how we should be putting more money into services that help people who need help in our city. So I just thought maybe it'd be a good idea today to sort of point out some of these things that don't show up in the general fund budget that people have been looking at, but make a significant contribution to exactly the types of things people are saying we need. This one is funding from the Commonwealth to continue to provide comprehensive information and direct services to victims and witnesses of crimes. It's $304,408 from the Commonwealth of Virginia. There is a $32,242 local match for a total amount of $336,650 to help people who have either witnessed or actually been victims of crimes within our city. And I just think it's important for people to understand that funding is also part of the services that happen in the city of Roanoke that are not reflected in the general fund budget per se. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Very well said. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is approved. The resolution passes on a 6-0 vote. All right, I have a budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance.
Second. Bill Bestfitch, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Commonwealth of Virginia for the Victim Witness Program Grant, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2019-2020 grant fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
All right, any comments by members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Sorry, aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the vote is 6-0 to approve the budget ordinance. It passes. Thank you. Item number 6B is a communication from the city treasurer recommending acceptance of the reimbursement as a licensed agency of DMB. It's called DMB Select, and a communication from the city manager concurring in the recommendation. There is a budget ordinance.
I move the budget ordinance, Vice Mayor Cobb.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, please read the title paragraph.
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the U.S. Department of Transportation through the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles to be a licensed agent called a DMV Select Office, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 General Fund and Grant Fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments by members of council? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the budget ordinance passes with a 6-0 vote. Item number C is a presentation by Ms. Durant, representing No Justice, No Peace, to share information with regards to the DARE officers in school. I want to call on the clerk to confirm that Ms. Durant is on the line.
Yes, Mayor. Tatiana Durant is on the line.
All right. Well, we're going to allow her 10 minutes, and she's being sponsored by Vice Mayor Cobbs and Councilwoman Davis. So, Ms. Durant, welcome to Roanoke City Council.
Ms. Durant?
Thank you, Council. I just want to say that I'll be speaking about a few things today, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you, Council members Michelle Davis, Vice Mayor Joe Cobb, Mayor Lee,
for speaking with me about some of these issues one-on-one. And I thank you all for the opportunity to. Hello?
Tatiana, it's Michelle. We can hear you.
So yeah, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address you directly. I read the Roanoke Times article about the 100-person rally held yesterday in support of the Roanoke City Police Department, and I saw many questions and claims raised by the supporters of the Roanoke City Police. Former Police Chief Tim Jones stated that the Roanoke City Police Department is not perfect, but it is the best we've got. Is a militarized response to peaceful protests really the best we've got? I would wager that the best for our city is not funding a punitive institution by an extra $1 million during a global pandemic, but focusing on healing and protecting our community while we experience Roanoke's first intense wave of COVID-19. Another quote was about bad apples, stating that Derek Chauvin was one individual and one individual acting on his own. Obviously, this is not true. Putting aside the other 3 officers charged in George Floyd's murder, read a little bit of the history and you'll find a long list of so-called bad apples who receive slaps on the wrist for blatant crimes ranging from sexual assault to murder. They get away with it because they are protected by police unions and qualified immunity, or because so-called good apples remain silent or are bullied out of their department. It makes much more sense to view the system as broken rather than using a few individuals to excuse the violence and systemic racism committed by the system as a whole. Another sign holder asked, why are we handcuffing our guardians? It may feel like the police are your guardians, but they are not. Not when they pick and choose when to uphold your rights to live, your right to free speech, and the rights to assemble. Is escalated police presence and retaliation an appropriate response to peaceful protest when no justice, no peace, and all other groups have remained peaceful and not acted as a threat to our community? So far, we only handcuff police when a murder is caught on a bystander's video. We must do better. Our reaction to the Roanoke City Police Department is not based on feelings, not even really based on political leanings, but based on reality. Whether that is in the form of history, statistics, or firsthand experience. The history is that police departments historically evolved from slave patrols and private union busters and have done little besides propaganda to convince us that they have changed. They are the arbiters of systemic racism and class oppression. The statistics are that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Police kill Black men at 3 times the rate of white men, and in general, they kill roughly 1,000 people every year in the Roanoke City jail. Black community members make up almost 50% of the jail population, when we do not even make up 30% of the Roanoke City general population. When we meet the city officials about the budget, we plan to dissect just how much of this funding goes towards criminalizing Blackness in our community and how much can be put towards rehabilitation and creating healthy foundations for the community. On our firsthand experiences, $500,000 was cut from education in the 2021 budget, even though you all stated education was your first priority. Meanwhile, $1 million was added to policing in a pandemic. 2 recent deaths of Black men, Israel Monte Jackson and Rashid Mormon, and little transparency on the part of the police department. Not to mention Roanoke City Police Department's failure to condemn the actions of Roanoke County Police and demand justice for the murder of Keontae Spencer. Recently, we were informed that prisoners are forced to clean up diplomatic chalk drawings, no justice, no peace, leaves in front of the police station. Think about that and explain to me how that contributes to any kind of justice or giving these human beings tools to reintegrate into a life outside of the prison system. What can we do right here? Our most immediate goals are transparency regarding multiple cases where people have died at the hands of the police and the defunding of the DARE program and SROs in Roanoke City schools. The family of Israel Monte Jackson demands more transparency regarding the circumstances of Israel's death and the ruling of suicide, given that multiple details do not add up. We as a community are also asking for more transparency regarding the recent death of Rashid Mormon, which may come in the form of body cam footage. We understand this investigation is being conducted by the Virginia State Police, but it is the job of our local police department and city officials to publish updates as the realities of the case are revealed. To me, if the police have equipment to de-escalate, such as tear gas or pepper bullets, there is no reason another Black man should be dead for being suspected of a crime, no matter his actions. It is our intention to reach out to the Chief of Police to discuss these same issues and discuss a way to make the activities of the police department more transparent without roadblocking grieving family members with paperwork or controlling the media narrative to not properly cover the stories. Finally, we demand DARE be replaced with a different and more effective drug prevention and harm reduction program. At the very least, the $500,000 devoted to the program can be given instead to more trustworthy and effective non-police programs. DARE has a 30-year history of being ineffective, vigorously fighting for misinformation and lack of transparency regarding the release of data about its ineffectuality, and perpetuating an explicitly racist war on drugs. When DARE finally was exposed as ineffective after the 30-year-long fight, it began to become more like other programs, dropping the scare tactics and the dependency on just say no authoritative tactics. These were the reasons police administered the program in the first place. We have no need for police in the drug prevention role anymore, not when medical professionals, social workers, or educators are vastly more prepared to help out communities. As a community that is riddled with our own pandemic of addiction, we need to acknowledge that drug use and addiction are not a criminal issue or a public safety issue, but a physical and mental health issue, and modify our education and treatment programs accordingly. There is a long list of proven alternatives to DARE for us to choose from. I'm sure we can find one that the community approves of. No Justice, No Peace's next steps will be researching more about the SROs, which we intend to share with City Council. It is in our opinion that when we talk about demilitarizing Roanoke City Police, that begins with demilitarizing our schools. In coming days, we will also be reaching out to the Roanoke City School Board to discuss these same issues and present more information on how to tailor our schools to cultivate learning for all students and properly combat systemic racism in the school system. In closing, if anyone is listening to us at all, I'm not sure how you could come to the conclusion that there are not problems in our community. There are problems. This is not the best we've got, not by a long shot. But these are the problems that we can solve. And that shouldn't be too difficult, but we have to admit that we have them. I understand that none of you made this system, and you are all doing what you feel is best based upon your knowledge and standards. But as we receive new knowledge and set new standards, it is important that Roanoke City set a precedent for the state of Virginia and the country in terms of combating systemic racism. Thank you all.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right, I'm going to go to Ms. Davis and Ms. Vice Mayor to respond if they have anything that they'd like to say.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Cobb, do you mind if I take the lead on this?
You go ahead. You go right ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And I also want to thank you for taking the time to speak with individual council members prior to. One of the things that I think is so important, we as a community, we have to be willing to listen to both sides of the conversation. And I think that you bring a valid perspective to this conversation that needs to be heard. And I appreciate your willingness to come before council today in order to express not only your opinions and to share with us some of the research that you've done, but I know that you are also supported by a lot of people within our city that are concerned about some of these similar issues. And so I appreciate you being representative of the folks who have been participating in some of the peaceful protests with you and by your side. And just, again, appreciate that you've stepped up to help lead a group that is bringing some valid concerns to the attention of local leaders. I know that we do have a long ways to go in this city, and that's not to say that people aren't trying. And I do believe that this council and this administration is looking specifically at issues of equity, at issues of systemic racism, at issues that revolve around history that predates every single person that's here on this council today, but that we now have to take responsibility for. And so I thank you for your willingness again to speak. And I think that it's important that as we move forward as council members and trying to help evaluate how we create a more equitable society for all of our citizens that live here, that we take into account these perspectives and these viewpoints as well, because it is really important. So thank you. Vice Mayor Cobb, did you have follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Davis and Ms. Durant. Tatiana, thank you so much for your research, for your daily protests, your presence. You keep showing up, and I appreciate every citizen who keeps showing up to raise these issues, to point out where we are experiencing systemic racism. For folks who may not know the history of the war on drugs, I commend to you not only some of what was shared today, but to take a close historical examination of that. I believe that there's a pretty dedicated section in Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, which kind of chronicles the history of racism over the last 400 years. And there's a pretty extraordinary section in there, I believe, about this. I agree that when we have programs that are long existing, if they don't go under a process of review on a regular basis, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing the people that we asked to serve in these particular roles a disservice. To just hand something down from year to year or generation to generation is not an equitable practice in local government or in our educational system. And so I'm glad that we're reviewing this. Alongside what you have shared today, I would support conversation about this with our school board. I realize that our superintendent is brand new at this, but I also know she comes from previous school system that has wrestled with this as well. I think she can bring some great perspectives. I think it's important that we hear from principals, from people engage this, with both the challenges as well as the benefits, because over time and over conversations of recent weeks, I've been hearing both. And so I think it's important that we bring all of that to the table, that we explore it, that we review it, that we come up with a better plan, a stronger plan. And I also appreciated what you said about, reevaluating where we are as a community in terms of drug use and what we're seeing locally. This has certainly come to the forefront because of our discussions around opiates. And yet even opioid use, we're starting to see that shift somewhat. Kind of a back and forth between heroin and meth and opiate use. So I think to to analyze that, to review that, to determine, if we want a program, an educational program in our schools and in our communities that addresses at an earlier age about the dangers of drug use, what are the most effective programs and how can we engage community partners in supporting that work? So those are just a couple of initial comments. I look forward to following up with you more about this. And I just wanted to thank you for your time in preparing for this, the research that you've done, and all that you've shared with us today.
Okay, are there any other members of council? Any comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Durant, for your comments. And we will move now to item number 7 on the agenda, which is reports of the city officers and comments of the city manager. Before the city manager makes his presentation, I ask that council members hold their questions until the end of the presentation, and I will ask council members in alphabetical order for their questions and comments. And so now I'll call on the city manager to introduce the briefing.
We're just going to go straight to the briefing. I'm looking to Sherman to see if we're going to go straight to, are we going to go straight to, okay. So we've got there's a presentation that's going to be made by the design consultant. And so we're going to walk through that and then we'll come back together to answer any questions that you may have, either of the consultant, Sherman Stovall is here, myself, as well as Kevin Price as well. So as we go through, should you have any questions after that. So, thank you.
Mayor Lee, City Council, thank you for your time today. My name is Jackie Mayrosh. I am a principal at Spectrum Design and the project manager for the new bus transit facility project. I have Nathan Harper with me. He is also a principal at Spectrum, and he is our director of design. We've been asked by the city manager's office to provide you a briefing of where we are with the design of the new facility. So we have a slideshow that I think you guys all can see. And we'll go through that. Spectrum has partnered with Michael Baker International. They are an expert in transit design. And the two of us have been working probably since early spring to design the new transit facility that will be a home for Valley Metro and for the Greyhound facilities when they vacate Campbell Court. So if you want to click to the next slide, this is the site that the city has purchased a few years back. And it will be the home of the new transit station. It is located at the corner of Salem and 3rd, so just a few blocks west of Campbell Court. It's bounded by Norfolk Avenue on the north and the Roanoke Homeless Assistance Team. I think you guys are probably all familiar with this surface lot. The Virginia Museum of Transportation will be our neighbor. And we've been working to develop this site to allow 18 buses for Valley Metro plus Greyhound to circulate and be their new transit hub. I'm going to turn it over to Nathan now, and he's going to kind of walk you through the architecture and where we are. I'll say we're about 60% of the way through with the design. We've performed some public input sessions to get some feedback on the look of the buildings, and we are preparing to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals this week, actually. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Thank you, Jackie. This is Nathan here. So we wanted to start off by taking a look at the surrounding context around the site. So you'll see kind of an aerial, a panorama view here at the top, and you get a sense of that lot and some of the perimeter buildings. Looking at the architecture of the surrounding neighboring buildings, you see a lot of brick is kind of a dominant material, and both in several different hues here. You also see steel a lot used in the windows, also in, for example, in the overhang canopy from the Transportation Museum. It's also a fair amount of glass, both at the street level and also up higher on transit conditions, and wood as well. So the initial thought was to try to create something that really fits with the context. And so we wanted to study that material palette a little bit more to make sure that we were being consistent with the surrounding structures. Next. And so here you'll see an aerial view of the site. The dark dashed line that goes around the perimeter is the property line. The first thing you'll notice here is the fact that the property line is set back off of Salem with some distance. There is an existing yard condition that is created there. So the site feels a little bigger when you walk by than it really is along that front edge. So the building is set back off of that. Due to the zoning situation here, it made the most sense to comply with zoning to break this into two pieces for the building, so that one building would anchor the corner of 3rd and Salem, and then the other building would be elongated and stretched out along Salem. We think this is working quite well in that it has a nice presence, which you'll see a little bit later from the intersection, but it also helps to shield the canopy a little bit more from the main kind of Salem corridor here. You'll notice off of the buildings, there are a series of white rectangles. The white rectangles on the bottom side, these are buses. So that grouping of white rectangles at the bottom half of that graphic circulate around one side of the building. The rectangles up to the top are the main kind of circulation island. And so the buses would pull into these bus slips, and passengers can hop on, hop off before they exit the facility. There will be a fence kind of element down the middle. GRTC, one of their big concerns from the beginning was safety for riders. And so we've really tried to keep people and keep the pedestrian travel and the bus travel as isolated as possible. Okay. Next slide. So here you see an aerial view. I believe this was picked up by several news outlets fairly recently, so you may have seen these before. These were also presented to the community. This is an aerial view looking southwest. So if you were up in a drone up over Norfolk and 3rd, looking back towards the parking garage there, kind of gives you a sense of the massing of the building. The homeless assistance building is that long white building that you see kind of up in the northeast corner of your screen. The good news about that building is it kind of shields some of the view of this from Salem Avenue. But you get a sense of how the canopies are situated here. We've tried to make this as efficient as possible, but also functional for GRTC. And so it's a series of canopies that are all interconnected to keep riders out of the weather. And if you go to the next view, here you're looking at it from you're looking northeast. So you can see the way that it sits along the street. And again, you start to see some of those bus. Again, to reiterate on this, the buses come into this space and then they leave the space. So they're not parked here most of the time. That's only really when they're loading and unloading. Next. And here is another view looking southeast. Again, just giving you another sense of the canopy system relative to the building. And you'll start to see some eye level views in this as well. We're studying this more and more now from the ground level, just to make sure that the building and the architecture and the relationship of all these parts and pieces is compatible. And so the building up top on the top right was an early study looking down Salem, just to take a look at the way that building, the homeless assistance building, cuts out a lot of the view to the back portion of the site. So by loading that building to the front, we're able to hold that street edge, if you will, for pedestrians or people motoring up and down the roadway there. And then the other image here is kind of a nighttime shot where this is still all very much in development, but starting to get a sense of what it feels like underneath the canopy at night, what those materials might be, but really trying to make this more bright. As you know, the current Campbell Court location is quite dark inside that space where the buses all kind of come out of the beehive, if you will. In this situation, we're going to be open air, so making sure people have adequate cover, but also making a space that feels light and inviting. So we're continuing to study that. Next view. So these are some of the elevation studies that we're currently doing. We've been working closely with the city on the transparency requirements and all for zoning. So these are some of the early studies that we've been working on with this. But you can see up top, this would be the south elevation of the GRTC building. This would contain all of the public-facing functions as well as the office conference type spaces for the GRTC operation. We try to keep the buildings fairly low through this area and to keep in kind of a consistent scale with the Transportation Museum. So you'll see the two side elevations and also the rear, which will be largely obscured by the canopies. Next. Here we have, go back here. There you go. This is the Greyhound building, the elevations, the four elevations of the Greyhound building. Again, the idea of making these two buildings have some interaction between the two, similar in scale and in terms of material palette. And you start to see how the windows and the entrances and all are coordinated here so that the two work together as a whole, even though they each have a little bit of their own character. Next. And I mentioned earlier, we've been looking at what these two buildings and associated canopies start to feel like from the street view, from the neighbor's perspective, et cetera. So these are a few renderings, visuals that are very fresh. This one is an aerial looking from that intersection of 3rd and Salem, looking back at the site in kind of an evening shot. So you can get a sense of how, sometimes I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. Get a sense of the scale of these buildings relative to the surroundings and how this helps to almost create a gateway at this area downtown. Next. And here's an eye-level view from the same position. So you see the Transportation Museum beyond. We are currently looking at landscaping. We're working with Hill Studio here locally to develop the plantings and trying to make sure that this is really functional but also beautiful for those that use the facility and also those that pass the facility as they move back and forth through downtown. Next. And here's a view eye level from Salem looking back to the east. So you see the Wells Fargo Tower in the background there. Kind of, we put some of the background in these visuals to give you a sense of where you're standing. And so you see the GRTC building sitting right there along that street face, and then some of the canopies beyond. Next. And then we have two more views. This is another one a little bit closer, just to give you a sense of the glass wall here, which is in the main lobby area and also into some of the public facing spaces of the GRTC's operations. And next. And this is a view from Norfolk Avenue, looking at the canopy system from the side. This is not a view that many people would have, but it shows you that access between the canopies. You'll notice there's a step in those canopies. We're working on the grading of the site, making sure that all this is accommodating the heights of the buses, et cetera. But we think it's quite attractive, but also functional, and we're quite excited about being a part of the project. So one more slide, I believe.
Yeah, so Nathan has talked you through the architecture and what the finished product will look like. This project is a challenge to get there, so it will have a staged, phased construction approach. The goal will be to allow Valley Metro and Greyhound to vacate Campbell Court soon after a contractor is brought on board. So if you look at phase 1, you'll see a reddish box to the south side. This will be our construction area for phase 1. And the idea is that we build the two buildings first. This allows, real construction to happen. People will see things going on. And in the meantime, we have temporary bus loading and unloading to the north of the site. That will allow both Valley Metro and Greyhound to remain in continuous operation. In order to do that, you see some white boxes. We'll have a cluster of modular units that are brought in so that all of the forward-facing and back-of-house amenities that are required to run a bus operation can remain, remain active. So one thing that we've been considering is during stage one, when we're building the two buildings, we think there's a big opportunity with the fenced area that we can provide some graphics, some screened graphics on there that either will show renderings of what the building will look like, that can play to the transportation museum, and try to confine the construction and keep this as, a nice corner, a nice place for the patrons of Valley Metro and Greyhound as they change buses, but also allow construction in progress to happen on this corner. When we move to stage two, the buildings are constructed, and that lets Valley Metro and Greyhound move into their permanent facilities, which will be really nice. In that time, then we start doing construction in the Aqua Square. So we'll start building the north island and the north set of canopies. There's enough area between those two sections to allow temporary bus movements. I do have to say, for the temporary conditions, it'll be similar to Campbellport, where buses are first in, first out. So there's not a lot of flexibility for GRTC in terms of bus movement. One of the things that the new design allows is buses are not independent on other buses to enter and leave the site. So the first bus in doesn't have to be the first one out. They have a lot more flexibility with their routing in the new configuration. So when we get to stage three, the project is almost completely built. We have some canopies to finish up, and we have some safety things on the site that need to be wrapped up. So we talked about having a fence down the middle of the island, and you can see that in the orange block. Basically this prevents a patron from a bus at the top island from just running across the parking lot to the bottom island. They have to use the pedestrian walkway. It makes it safer for them and easier for the bus drivers to maneuver because they know where the crossing points are. As part of this project, we'll also be replacing sidewalks along Salem and 3rd. So that will likely happen in this phase. Another thing that we're doing is we want to make sure the pedestrian access around the site is safe. So if you look, you see a orange block over next to the homeless assistance team building. That's a new sidewalk to provide connection between Norfolk and Salem. So any pedestrians that need to get between those two roads can use this new walkway instead of having to traverse the GRTC site to make that crossing. So we think that that will increase pedestrian safety here. Another thing that we're going to be doing is improving the intersection, improving the pedestrian access at the intersection of Salem and 3rd. So we'll have new ADA curb cuts that are bi-directional, that's safer for pedestrians and motorists. We'll be adding some ped heads in. We really want to try to improve the safety at this intersection as much as possible. And that brings us over to our final configuration. So everybody is up and running here, and all of the site amenities have been completed. So that's kind of a really brief run through. I know that was a lot of information to throw at you guys, but I think that's an update of where we are now and what we're expecting the building to look like and how we're planning on getting there. So if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you all so much. Mayor Lee has stepped away, so I'm going to guide this next part of our meeting. And thanks everyone who presented today. A great, thorough presentation, very informative. I'm going to start with Councilwoman Trish White Boyd, and then we'll work our way over.
Hi.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cobb, and thank you, Ms. Marash, for the presentation. That was very thorough. I was a little bit fuzzy on the view that we would see if we were at the Transportation Museum. I'm just curious what it would look like if you're at the museum. Of course, we want it to be pleasing to the eye because it is the museum. So I don't remember if that was the back side or the front side.
Yeah, let me try to. So the view that's up right now, this is if you're standing in front of the Transportation Museum, kind of in the middle, not at the door of the Transportation Museum, but more kind of over in the middle of our lot, looking back towards Salem. So this would be the center of the canopies, looking back. The door you see in the background is the door to the Valley Metro building.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what
but I think we have an aerial. It's not in there. Okay. No.
Yeah, Ms. White-Boyd, this is Nathan here. We have, I believe we've looked at it from that angle. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like there's a view from that angle in this slideshow.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see it, but I was wondering if I missed it, but thank you. And I just have, okay, and you can take that down. And I have one other question about the, oh, there we are. I never know when you can see me now. I just have one other question. I know we are really in the early phases of this, but I was wondering, is there any conversation about accommodating electric or hybrid buses? I know that we're going to have to talk about funding, but I do realize that there might be some grants out there. I think I spoke briefly last year with Bob Cowell about it, and I don't know that we've had any discussion about actually paying for them or how we would fund it, but I think we would really be remiss, and I think we would really miss an opportunity if we don't figure out a way to at least make them feasible or a way to accommodate them in the future, because I don't know when we'll get a new bus station. It's going to be, I'm sure, years or decades, and I'd like for us to even at least have that conversation about if we could convert it at some point, or if there would be a place to put some, just in case we are fortunate enough to acquire some. How you doing, Mr. Stovall? I see.
Good afternoon, Councilmember White-Boyd. We have had conversations as we've talked about the design of the facility to accommodate electric buses. So the functionality to accommodate electric buses will be a part of the construction. Internally, Kevin Price, the Valley Metro manager, and his team have also had conversations about the conversion to electric buses in the future. Our focus, I guess, over the last several months has been on designing the facility not only to accommodate the current operational practices and equipment, but the future operational practices and equipment as well.
That pleases my ear. I just wanted to hear that we've at least had the conversations. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that question was coming from me, if no one else. Thank you.
I knew it. Thank you. Councilwoman Anita Price.
Oh, thank you. Very well done, Ms. White-Boyd. I'm glad you've been persistent. I just want to say thank you to Ms. Mayrosh and to the young man. I apologize, I didn't catch your name, for the presentation. The only question, first of all, I would say that this definitely is coming along and aesthetically is looking really accommodating. And speaking of accommodations, I can't tell if there is a location for staff and visitor parking, and if so, where might it be located?
There is staff parking located on site. We have 6 parking spots, one of which is ADA compliant. Because of the function of this facility, we aren't required to have a lot of parking, because basically all the buses come here and this is where people transfer before they head back out. But we do have one ADA compliant parking spot on site. People will also have access to on-street parking as well as the Campbell garage, which is very close.
All right, thank you. And did I understand you to say that there was only one dedicated handicap parking space?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Is Ms. Davis here? All right, Ms. Davis.
I warned council before we went live, but I have a cat that keeps traversing across my screen. So I've been keeping my video turned off, but listening very closely. I appreciate seeing the designs on the bus station. I think my question, is there any intention on creating any additional impervious surface? I know that there's a lot of, obviously a lot of pavement involved and already a lot of pavement that we are building on top of, but is there any hopes that we will have some more impervious surface in that what is currently just a flat surface lot than what exists right now?
So currently the site is 100% impervious. Wherever the buses are, using impervious surfaces just is not feasible in terms of longevity for the site. Maneuvering buses is very hard on pavement. So we've looked into it, but we don't feel like it's a very good long-term solution in terms of, you know, what is going to last for GRTC coming. We do have some areas of planting. So the proposed site layout is about 95% impervious. So we have about 5% of areas of planting. We're not considering grass and things, but, you know, trees and vegetative ground cover.
Okay.
Something that's easy for Valley Metro to maintain.
Got it. I appreciate that information. I think my next question really, I appreciate that the streetscape views give us an idea of what, of how the station fits into the neighborhood. And for any of us that have had conversations with folks in the neighborhood, the biggest concern is a bus station a good fit in this neighborhood? And the majority of the folks who live there will tell you they don't believe it is. I think that that's more than just design. So I know our question today is revolving around the idea of the design and not the station itself. So I appreciate the work that you guys have done, and I appreciate the work you've done to incorporate the design into the overall feel of the neighborhood. Is there a plan as you all are designing this building? I know we just talked about electric buses, but is there a plan for expansion and or contraction of the station as changes, as our needs change within the city of Roanoke? So, you know, let's say we find that public transportation within the next 30 years becomes, you know, the main form of transportation in the city of Roanoke. And we have to house lots more vehicles. Is there an opportunity to either expand on the current design, or should there become another opportunity for a different location further down the road? Is there the opportunity to kind of contract this design? Is it being constructed with the future potential changes in mind?
I think it's a great question, and maybe one that GRTC would need to weigh in on as well. But I think from the design team's perspective, the accommodations really are based around the current bus counts. I think plus one in there. There's a dedicated slot for the smart bus, for example, and currently the city operates on a hub and spoke model. So these buses all come in simultaneously and they depart simultaneously. I would say to expand, there might need to be some shift in the way that they operate that, given that we are fairly landlocked in a downtown location. In terms of contracting it, I certainly think that could be possible. It's a fairly modular design concept. So I could see a situation in which, you know, it could be shortened fairly easily or scaled back in the future. So I don't know if that's a direct answer to your question, but it's an attempt at giving you a sense of the scalability of the design as it currently stands.
Well, when you say modular design concept, I think that kind of summarizes what I was saying without saying it very eloquently at all. So thank you. I think that it's, you know, even looking at our current trolley system, I appreciate you bringing that up. you know, in the future, there may be more trolleys than buses, right? We see that transportation is changing and that the transportation needs within our city are changing too. So I do want to make sure that this design will be looking towards the future and is not just immediately outdated the second that we open it. So thank you guys for all the work you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's a great point.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Bestfitch.
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor Cobb, and thank you, Ms. Mayrush and Mr. Harper for a great presentation, sort of bringing us up to speed today. I have one, I guess, sort of general question and then one a little bit more specific. You know, when we get these briefings for projects as they move along, sometimes it's not real clear, at least to me, when we're moving from the conceptual to the actual design features. For example, you showed some supporting pillars underneath the canopy that showed brick, and I just want to know if we're sure that's going to be brick, or could it be just a concrete pillar in the same shape, or how locked in are we on what the design is, what the appearance, I guess, is really going to be?
So we are, I would say we are beyond concept on this. So the Board of Zoning Appeals application goes in this week, and that will provide details on the types of finishes that we are expecting to have at the building. And we are committed to the brick. As Nathan talked about, we think that it fits in well with the neighborhood and that it would be a vital part of the design. So as far as the nitty-gritty details, they have not been determined, but the concepts that you saw are more than concepts. It is what we intend for the buildings to be.
So that is how you intend that they will look once they're completed.
Correct.
So there was one slide that showed the elevation, I guess would be the south elevation. That's if you're standing on Salem Avenue looking at the building, and at the far left there's some notations around the building. Far left it said something about the restrooms, and I think mechanical rooms would be in that area.
Correct.
What else is going to be inside the building? I mean, we've focused pretty much on the outside, but besides the restrooms and mechanical area, what else is inside?
Sure, I'll field that. It's a good question. So we'll start with the GRTC building, which is the more long, narrow building, the main building.
Right.
And that building is essentially subdivided in half. It might be 60-40, but the double doors that you walk into from that main entrance, you walk right into a lobby area, a waiting area that has ticketing, and then there are men's and women's restrooms there. There's also a family restroom, which is connected off of that, or a unisex restroom. So that is what we would consider kind of the public out-facing component. The area to the right, when you walk into that main waiting space, includes some office type support functions for the drivers for GRTC. So you have the ticket office there. You have a break room area for the drivers. You also have the restroom facilities to support them, and they're also like a custodial type office, mechanical type spaces. So that's the main GRTC building. Looking over to the other building, you have the Greyhound building. That has a similar but smaller entry waiting area, similar ticket office. It has also the male-female support restrooms as well as a unisex restroom. And then it has a luggage storage and handling room. And then, of course, IT and mechanical support space. So those are the functions contained within the two buildings.
So there's no space that would be available for lease for any sort of a retail operation, such as currently happens in the Campbell Court building?
That is correct.
And there's no office space that would be available for any other organization Again, such as Campbell Court currently has some office space that other people can use. We won't have any of that.
To my understanding, the office space that we have provided here would be utilized in full by GRTC and or Greyhound.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And, you know, some of us have been around working on this for quite a long time, and I'm glad we've gotten to this point, and I hope that we can continue forward, and it won't be too much longer before we see that construction actually beginning, and also see the beginnings of the planned use of the current Campbell Court property. Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Just a couple of questions. One of the challenges in all of this has been understanding, as Councilwoman Davis alluded to earlier, how transportation is changing in our city and what that looks like. And we've had a lot of conversations about being multimodal. And has there been, in terms of this design, has there been conversation about identifying through signage or linking somehow the end of the Amtrak platform, which is just on the other side of the bridge? You can actually come down the platform and walk under the bridge with fairly safe access to the Transportation Museum. Has there been conversation about connecting that in terms of the design or the overall process?
You know, our role in this project has been kind of strictly limited to the development of this site. I know that it's challenging to link Amtrak to Valley Metro currently because their schedules do not overlap. So any connection that would be made, at least at this point in time, wouldn't allow direct transfer from Amtrak to Greyhound, just because of the from Amtrak to Valley Metro, just because of the hours that Valley Metro runs. So there's kind of this greater timing issue in addition to needing to develop that pathway between the two sites a little bit more. But even if we could develop it right now, just the way the schedules run for each of the two entities, it doesn't allow for a seamless transition.
Okay. In terms of safety, and I appreciate the comprehensive approach you've given to this, everything is very different now because of COVID-19. We're even looking at how we build things differently to allow for spacing. And open air certainly contributes to that. Were there other considerations that you took into consideration? Were there other elements of this that we're experiencing during this pandemic that you took into consideration in looking at the design and just making sure that spacing is adequate? I know that just by the open concept, we're probably not going to see the bunching that we tend to see at Campbell Court, the risk that people in wheelchairs just maneuvering, getting off of a bus and then maneuvering through the labyrinth to get to another bus. I think the timing and the access is going to be so much better in this, but I just wondered if you could elaborate any on that.
Yeah, we've been taking a look at that, and as you know, this is kind of a fluid situation with trying to, as we all try to work our way through what the built environment, how it functions given this current COVID situation, how we can improve on that. Some of these things are more active. For example, the mechanical system and the fresh air changes and the filtration and all for the interior spaces within the building. These are things that we'll continue to be looking at as the design develops. I do think that the outdoor open air aspect of the facility greatly helps. We have a pretty significant platform size, just due to the way that the buses move and the turning radius of the buses. We have a lot more outdoor space for people. Right now in Campbell Court, and the buses are all loaded in there, there's very little space for riders to stand and while they're waiting. So I think by spacing out and allowing that, that there's some increased distance between folks there. And as you mentioned, from an accessibility standpoint, they'll be greatly improved for those needing those accommodations. So I think it's something we're continuing to monitor and study and investigate. We think that the big picture of how it's all organized and laid out is working quite well in addressing a pandemic situation. But I think there are still some details as we go forward that we can refine.
Thank you. You may have covered, go ahead, Ms. Davis.
I'm sorry, Joe. I just wanted to ask, Jackie, you mentioned that this was going to go in front of, and I missed it. It was either BZA or Planning Commission when we were talking about the overall, the process moving forward from this point, which I appreciated that clarification. Can you remind me what you stated? Who does it go to next and when will that be?
Sure, we're going to Board of Zoning Appeals and that application will be submitted later this week.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great question. And you may have covered this. Where will the buses be entering this pavilion and where will they be exiting?
Sure, if we can pull the any of those site plans back up on the screen, I think it will be easier. There's a couple of access points. If you can go to slide 4, I think is probably the easiest to see. Okay, there you go. Oh, go back. That's it. Okay, so we have two, you'll see we have 2 entrances off of Salem and basically 2 entrances off of Norfolk. Sorry, not entrances, 2 access points. Buses will be able to enter at the far west access point on Salem. That'll allow buses to access either canopy, the north canopy or the south canopy. They'll also be able to enter from either point off Norfolk to circle the top canopy. The east entrance on Salem will be right turn exit only for buses. And also, as far as traffic restrictions go, Roanoke City Transportation has reviewed this, and those were some of their caveats, that east entrance on Salem be right turn exit only. And also, there will be no right turn on Salem at the intersection of 3rd Street.
Okay. Because one of the concerns that we've heard is that a portion of Salem Avenue is pretty narrow, and so I know that neighbors there as well as others have wondered about the impact of traffic there on Salem. But it sounds like it's going to go primarily the other direction. Is that correct?
I'll have to defer to GRTC and Valley Metro on their exact routing. But yes, we'll also be doing some stormwater improvements on Salem that will actually widen up the right-hand lane if you're heading east, and that should make bus turning on and off of Salem easier.
Vice Mayor Cobb, I would just say that Valley Metro, they are currently in the process of finalizing the ingress and egress points for each bus based on the route. I would also say that buses travel up Salem Avenue currently.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Thank you. Just a couple other questions, I promise. I'm glad to see that there is some landscaping. I wish we could have more because there's so little green space right there. I realize it's all parking lot right now. One of the reasons I say this is because at one of our earlier conversations when we were exploring this and hearing feedback, there was a lot of energy around enhancing the entrance to the Transportation Museum to really, direct people that way. And there was a subsequent concern about that this was going to minimize some of the parking. Now, I realize that the existing parking for the Transportation Museum is there along the building. and that they had gotten permission to have additional parking in what's now the parking lot. I just wondered if there had been conversation with them or thoughts about how to, and I know you've been restricted. Your guidance has been to create this design, and I appreciate that. This is really probably a bigger question for us as a city. But I wonder if there have been ongoing conversations about how to enhance that entrance to both benefit the landscaping, but also the transportation museum, and what the parking situation was going to look like. Are they essentially going to continue to have access to all the parking they have now? Are there going to be any limitations they might experience because of the buses coming in and out?
They'll have access to all of the parking that they have now that is on the north side of Norfolk. So they have those pull-in parking spaces that are adjacent to their building. All of those will remain as is. As far as access and improving access to their building, one thing that will happen as we replace the sidewalk along 3rd Street is that we will have a true accessible ADA crossing across Norfolk that leads to the ramp that they have at the ADA access ramp that they have at their entrance. So we are trying to improve pedestrian access as much as we can within the scope of the project.
Okay, thank you. And the last question I have is, what components of renewable energy, environmental design are you including in this new design? Is there any solar energy being used? I know some of this is cost related, but could you talk a little bit about how the design is environmentally friendly?
Sure, we are taking a look at the implications of adding solar in the future. And basically what that entails is enhancing the steel structure for the canopies. The canopies have a fairly favorable orientation for that. And so we need to make sure that if that is a future addition, that it can be structurally accommodated. As we mentioned earlier as well, the potential of the bus fleet moving forward and making those as efficient as possible is on the table as well. In terms of other sustainability features, of course, stormwater is something that we've been working on, both quality and quantity, and we'll continue to develop that. We are working on landscape selections and things that limit the need for watering in order to cut down on the need for water there. And of course, with the buildings, they will be designed with to meet the latest energy code, which involves pretty extensive amount of insulation with the envelope and higher performing systems. We have checked the solar orientation of the south wall. The roof overhang that you see along Salem is shielding that nicely. So we'll continue as the building develops to look into the materials that are used and make sure that we are making selections that are looking not only at the initial fabrication of that material, but also the life cycle associated with having that installed in the building for many, many years.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, well, thank you both very much. Thank you, Mr. Stovall. Bob, is there anything else you'd like to add to this before we move on to our next item?
No, there's nothing further, so thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll move to item 7A1, which is acceptance of the Southwest Virginia Regional Employment Coalition Grant from the Virginia Department of Social Services to maintain existing services to the temporary assistance to needy families population. We have two measures. The first is a resolution.
This is Michelle Davis. Move the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second, yeah.
Thank you both. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph of the resolution?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of an employment advancement for temporary assistance to needy families participants grant for the Virginia Department of Social Services, authorizing the city of Roanoke to serve as the primary fiscal agent for the distribution of such funds to provider agencies for services provided to the local departments of social services in Roanoke City, Roanoke County, Franklin County, Roanoke County, and Craig County, and authorizing execution of any and all necessary documents to comply with the terms and conditions of the grant.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments by council?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Bestfitch.
Again, just to try to help the public understand what's going on here, this is funding from the Commonwealth for job development and placement, mental health screening and referral, and medical case management that will allow TANF recipients to obtain employment. It's a partnership with our DSS department, along with the counties of Roanoke, Botetourt, and Craig, and Total Action for Progress, or TAP, and Goodwill Industries of the Valleys. $204,979.55 for exactly the kinds of programming that we've been hearing we need to make sure people have in Roanoke. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
And the motion passes 5 votes to 0. We now need a motion and second on the budget ordinance.
Michelle Davis, move the budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the federal government through the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Social Services for the Southwest Virginia Regional Employment Coalition Grant, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Any questions or comments by council? Not, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the motion passes. The budget ordinance passes. Item number 2, acceptance of fiscal year 2020 Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Title II grant from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services for the Creative Opportunities for Restorative Education, or CORE project. And there are 2 measures. The first is a resolution.
Anita Price, move the resolution.
White Boyd, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution accepting the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Title II grant made by the city from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services and authorizing execution of any required documentation on behalf of the city.
Mr. Bestfitch, anything you want to open up for us on that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. This is pass-through federal funding from the Commonwealth for the Creative Opportunities for Restorative Education, or CORE program of Family Service of Roanoke Valley, to provide a school day program for Roanoke City Public School students in grades 6 through 12 who are placed in out-of-school suspension. This is an evidence-based youth development curriculum that includes life skills and service learning programming to increase protective factors for youth at risk of juvenile justice involvement and decrease further acts of misconduct. In other words, just the opposite of the school to prison pipeline, a way to intercede to stop that from happening $57,468 with no local match required.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council?
I just want to thank my colleague, Mr. Bestfitch, because I cannot say as eloquently as he put it, but summarizing what an important piece of action this is that's coming before council, and how much it helps to improve quality of living for our younger citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Now I need a motion and second on the budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance.
Ms. Whiteboard, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Commonwealth of Virginia Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Title II grant for the Creative Opportunity for Restorative Education CORE project, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council? All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item number 3, acceptance of the fiscal year 2021 Virginia Domestic Violence Victim Fund Grant from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services. There are 2 measures. The first is a resolution.
Michelle Davis, move the resolution.
Anita Price, second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing acceptance of the FY21 Virginia Domestic Violence Victim Fund Grant made by the City of Roanoke by the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, and authorizing execution of any required documentation on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Mr. Bestfitch?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Here we have funding from the Commonwealth to cover part of the salary and benefits for a full-time sexual violence specialist in the Roanoke Police Department. The specialist investigates sexual violence offenses, ensures that victims receive support services throughout their cases, and prepares for prosecution of the perpetrators. The individual in this position also coordinates events in the Hispanic community, assists in criminal investigations there, and improves community relations for the Roanoke Police Department in that community. It's $31,588, which is not enough to cover this position. So even though the grant doesn't require a match, the city is adding $24,007 in order to maintain a full-time position, as we have had for actually some years now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. And now I need a motion and a second on the budget ordinance.
Michelle Davis, move the budget ordinance.
Ms. Whiteboard, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Commonwealth of Virginia for the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Victim Fund Grant, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Okay, any questions or comments? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item number 4, acceptance of the Virginia Department of Social Services Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Program Grant. There are 2 measures. The first is a resolution.
Anita Price, move the resolution.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Program grant to the City of Roanoke by the Virginia Department of Social Services in the amount of $50,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute any documentation required to accept such grant on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Mr. Bestfitch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. And let me just say that I don't plan to do this every meeting, but almost every single meeting that we have, we are accepting these sorts of grants and appropriating the money through budget ordinances to provide exactly the kinds of services in our city that people have been telling us we should be providing. So I'm very glad actually to see that so many more people are paying attention to the budget in the city, and I hope people will continue to be involved, especially as we move into a new process for the strategic plan and our fall retreat as we begin the budget process. We need to hear from citizens. We need to think about, as you said yourself earlier, whether what we're doing, what we have been doing for a long time is the best thing to continue, or whether we should start considering some other directions. That's very important. And it's important in that whole context to look at all of these funds that come into the city every single year to provide different programs. This one is funding from the Commonwealth that's especially near and dear to my heart, having worked during my career as a social worker a number of years with children and families who were involved in foster care and child protective services. This funding supports Parenting Little Ones, which is a child abuse and neglect prevention program now for the 6th year here in Roanoke. It's a public-private partnership with DSS, Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care, and Intercept Youth Services that includes both classroom and in-home components, translation services, bus passes, and child care for some 45 or more parents of children 0 to 5 years old identified by DSS as at risk of abusing and neglecting their children. $50,000 from the Commonwealth, matched by $2,984 in cash as a local match, and $9,516 in-kind match, for a total of $62,500. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the resolution passes. Now I need a motion and second on the budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, move the budget ordinance.
Anita Price, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the Virginia Department of Social Services for the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Program grant, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 grant fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Any questions or comments by council? Not, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item number 5, acceptance of the fiscal year 2020 Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, coronavirus relief funds allocated to state and local governments based on population proportions. There are 2 measures. The first is a resolution.
Move the resolution.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of the FY20 Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security Act, CARES, funding by the City of Roanoke from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, which provides financial aid to families and businesses impacted by the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and authorizing the acceptance, execution, and filing of appropriate documents to obtain such funds.
Mr. Cowell, am I correct in understanding that these next couple of measures are related to the relief funding that the city is receiving and that the Star City Strong Recovery Fund Task Force is addressing?
Yes, that is correct. And you'll recall from the introduction of the task force that a portion of these dollars are being set aside for expenditures that are associated with what we're incurring to adjust our municipal facilities and be able to deliver services. But about 2/3 of these funds are potentially available for the work that the task force is doing. So this is now moving those from really just the receipt of the grant into a category that we can start actually beginning to allocate those dollars once they have presented their recommendations to you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by council? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Now we move on to the budget ordinance.
The budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the United States Treasury for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Acts, CARES Act, Coronavirus Relief Fund, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2019-2020 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Any questions or comments by council? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item number 6, acceptance of the fiscal year 2020 Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, provider relief funds allocated for eligible providers who bill for Medicare fee-for-service. There are 2 measures. The first is a resolution.
Ms. White Boyd, move the resolution.
Bill Davis, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing the acceptance of the FY20 Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, CARES, funding in the amount of $146,406.60 by the City of Roanoke from the United States Department of Health and Human Services as part of the CARES Act Provider Relief Fund, which provides reimbursement of fees to eligible providers who bill for Medicare fee-for-service in connection with the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and authorizing the acceptance, execution, and filing of appropriate documents to obtain such funding.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Ms. Vice Mayor Cobb, I was just wondering how is this different from item number 5? It says for providers who bill for Medicare and fee-for-services. Is there any way Mr. Cowell can just explain the difference between item 5 and item 6?
Yes, so item 5 is what we've been talking about with the task force, which is what the allocation that came from Congress through the act to the states, and the state actually provided those dollars to localities based on population. This item actually deals with some of our EMS response in terms of funding that's based on Medicare recipients associated with like ambulance transports and those kinds of medical transports. So though it's coming out of the same act, just different kinds of pots of money in different directions associated with those. And we've not previously talked about this one before because it's a smaller amount compared to the larger amount that came in on item number 5.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering $146,000. I didn't think it would be reimbursing any of the doctors or clinics or anything. So it's primarily EMS.
Yes, with transport for the most part.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering. Thank you.
Great question, thanks. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. And now we move to the budget ordinance.
Anita Price, move the budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the United States Treasury for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, Provider Relief Fund, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2019-2020 grant fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the budget ordinance is approved. Item number 7, approval of Human Services Advisory Board allocation of funding to various nonprofit agencies for fiscal year 2021 and execution of a contract with the Council of Community Services to conduct performance audits. There is a resolution.
Mr. Bestfitch, I move the resolution.
Michelle Davis, move second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution approving the recommendations of the Human Services Advisory Board for allocation of city funds to various qualified agencies to assist such agencies in the performance of their programs for fiscal year 2020 through 2021, and authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute a contract with the Council of Community Services to perform the necessary performance audits to evaluate the effectiveness and efficiency of all the funded programs for such agencies.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Now we will consider the budget ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, move the budget ordinance.
Bill Bestfitch, second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to transfer funding to specific Human Services Committee agencies, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 general fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Any questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the budget ordinance is approved. Item number 8, approval of Roanoke Arts Commission allocation of funding to specific arts and culture agencies for fiscal year 2021. We have 2 measures, a resolution and a budget ordinance, and our first measure is the resolution.
Ms. White Boyd, move the resolution.
Anita Price, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution concurring with and approving the recommendations of the Roanoke Arts Commission's allocation of city funds to various nonprofit agencies for fiscal year 2020 through 2021.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Now we'll consider the budget ordinance.
Anita Price, move the budget ordinance.
Bill Bestfitch, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to transfer funding to specific art commission agencies, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2020-2021 general fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Any questions, comments?
Just one comment.
Yes, Ms. Bryce.
Yes, I just want to commend and thank those individuals, many of which are volunteers, who serve on two organizations that I forgot to thank: the Human Services Advisory Board and our Roanoke Arts Commission. Just thought it would be remiss if we did not thank them, because they certainly had a difficult decisions to make as well as far as making these allocations. So just want to say publicly thank you to both those groups.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White-Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item number 9, acquisition of real property rights in connection with the Wasina Bridge Replacement Project. There is an ordinance.
Ms. White-Boyd, move the ordinance.
Bill Bestfitch, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance providing for the acquisition of real property rights needed by the city in connection with the Wasina Bridge Replacement Project, authorizing city staff to acquire such property rights by negotiation for the city, authorizing the city manager to execute appropriate acquisition documents, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments by council? All right. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White-Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the budget and the ordinance passes. Item number 10, execution of amendment number 7 to the contract between the City of Roanoke and Intrado Life and Safety Solutions Corporation, FKA West Safety Solutions Corporation, to provide services in connection with the city's E911 operations. There is a resolution.
Ms. White-Boyd, move the resolution.
Michelle Davis, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing the city manager's issuance and execution of an amendment to the city's contract with Intrado Life and Safety Solutions Corp., West Safety Solutions Corp., to add an additional 9 dispatch stations at the new VA 811 and E911 Communications Center, and authorizing the city manager to take certain other actions in connection with such amendments.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council? Not, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White-Boyd?
Aye.
Ms. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the resolution passes. Item number 11, adoption of a resolution expressing intent to remove the Lee Monument and authorization to schedule a public hearing on August 16th, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. to hear the views of citizens. There is a resolution.
Michelle Davis, move the resolution.
Bill Bestfitch, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution expressing the intent of City Council to remove the Lee Monument from Lee Plaza in accordance with State Code Sections 15.2-1812A and 15.2-1812B, directing the city manager, city clerk, and city attorney to publish notice of City Council's intent to remove the Lee Monument from Lee Plaza, and publish notice of a public hearing, at which public hearing interested individuals express their views on the removal of the Lee Monument from Lee Plaza, to be held on August 16, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. or as soon as the matter may be reached or at such a later date and time as determined by the city manager and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, if I might.
Sure.
I just wanted to express, I guess, a little bit how frustrated I am at the amount of time it's going to take us to move through this process and reach a final conclusion. I had really hoped that since the General Assembly changed the law early in the year, and we'd all knew it was going to go into effect July 1, that we would be able to take this action and authorize the public hearing at our last meeting, because we had an extra Monday in between last meeting and this meeting, which would have meant that we could have had more than 30 days and had the public hearing 2 weeks from tonight instead of 6 weeks from tonight. But due to the way that the state code is written, that's what we have to do. And then we have to allow another 30 days beyond August in order to give opportunity for any museums, historical associations, or other people who may be interested in the monument to request it. What I really want to emphasize is that unlike what we see going on in some other places, we're going to follow the law. We're going to be very meticulous and very careful that we meet all the requirements that the General Assembly has set down in the Code of Virginia. And I just encourage everyone to be patient. We had a speaker pointed out earlier this afternoon that the monument has been there now for 60 years. If it takes a few more weeks to get this situation resolved, I hope that everyone can remain patient and confident in us as we are declaring today what our intentions are, and that we stick with the law. You know, other people might do things a different way. That's not how we do things in Roanoke. In Roanoke, we do things the way that they're supposed to be done. So I just hope that everyone in the community understands that, understands how frustrating it is for me personally, and I'm sure for others, to have to take as much time as we do. But that's the situation we're in. And let's just all bite our tongue and learn to live with it a few more weeks. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. Mr. Callahan?
Mr. Vice Mayor, a motion to amend pending resolution would be in order. My mistake, August 16th is a Sunday. If a motion would be to amend the date to August 17th at 7 p.m.
Or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard. I would move that amendment to.
And that needs to be seconded.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to amend the resolution.
Right. And the clerk should call the roll on the amendment.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the amendment?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Khan?
Aye, and the motion to amend is approved.
Now, a motion to adopt the resolution as amended would be in order.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the amended resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Second.
Is that all clear, Miss McCoy?
Yes, I received the motion from Mr. Bestfitch and seconded by Ms. Price.
All right. Thank you.
And the clerk will now read the amended title, and I'm going to give it to her.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan.
So read the entire title.
A resolution expressing the intent of the City Council to remove the Lee Monument from the Lee Plaza in accordance with the State Code Sections 15.2-1812A and 15.2-1812B, directing the city manager, city clerk, and city attorney to publish notice of City Council's intent to remove the Lee Monument from Lee Plaza and publish of a public hearing at which public hearing interested individuals may express their views on the removal of the Lee Monument from Lee Plaza to be held on August 17, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached, or at such later date and time as determined by the city manager and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the amended resolution passes. Thank you. Item number 12, authorization to enter into an amended and restated joint intergovernmental agreement with the counties of Roanoke, Franklin, Botetourt, and the cities of Roanoke and Salem for the Roanoke Valley Juvenile Detention Commission. There is an ordinance.
Move the ordinance.
Bill Bestfitch.
I'm going to have the motion by Ms. White Boyd and the second by Mr. Bestfitch. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute the amended and restated service agreement of the Roanoke Valley Detention Commission and other necessary documents among the commission and the cities of Roanoke and Salem and the counties of Franklin, Roanoke, and Botetourt, which are the member localities and comprise the commission, upon certain terms and conditions, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, if I could, I thought there was some very important information that came along with this item in our agenda packet concerning the utilization of the Roanoke Valley Detention Center. From 2002 through 2009, the average youth days spent in detention was 17,735 days per year. From 2010 to 2018, the average dropped down to 9,130 days per year. And for the last couple of years, it's been somewhere in the range of 6,200 days per year. I think there's two things that are contributing to this. One, many of the programs that we talked about, some of them earlier, we have these going on all the time. I think they're having a positive impact. Fewer youth are getting in trouble and needing detention. And secondly, many of those who are still getting into the juvenile justice system are being sent into diversion programs that don't involve detention. So I just think that when I looked at these numbers, I quite honestly, I was surprised to go from an average of almost 18,000 a year to just barely over 6,000 per year. That's an amazing improvement. And I just want to thank everybody in this community, because it hasn't just been the city. There's lots of agencies in Roanoke who provide services for youth and who work very hard to make sure that we keep kids out of trouble. And when they get in trouble, we try to fix it rather than just lock them up somewhere. So I just want everyone to know how much I appreciate those efforts and appreciate the progress that this report very clearly demonstrates.
Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. And I just want to remind the general public that all of these documents that Mr. Bestfitch is quoting from, these are public record. These are part of our agenda, which you can find on the City Council website. So I encourage you to take a look at this for additional information, as it's very pertinent and very helpful. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Now we'll turn to our city manager, Mr. Cowell, for any comments that he brings before us today.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I have a little bit lengthier set of comments, so I'll move through these as quickly as I can. One of those, as you all know, of course, last week we started the next phase of our limited reopening, and that started with the DMV Select services. And I can say as of this morning, they are being very well utilized by the public. The lines continue to be quite long, long enough that we're continuing to evaluate our ability to continue to serve in that capacity. So but right now, those services remain open to the public and again are being managed as they go in. Today, we continued that limited phased reopening of municipal facilities by opening essentially all of our offices here at the municipal building. However, we are encouraging folks to continue to actually avail themselves of our services online, which obviously, again, since we've been effectively closed to those services for the last 3 to 4 months, and all of those have been delivered online, certainly those opportunities remain as we go forward. Once someone does come into the building, they're required to obviously physically distance from others, as well as wear a face mask when they enter the building. As mentioned, some of our employees have continued to work. However, a large portion of our workforce continues to telework, and we'll use a measured approach as we gradually bring them back into the workplace. A few important things to note, and all of these are also identified on our website to help citizens understand what services are available, how, and how they can address those. The permit center is still not open to walk-in customers. Staff will continue to perform the majority of customer interactions remotely. So if you come here, if you were used to coming here and applying for your permit at the permit counter, that option is still the same as it has been for the last 4 months, which is do that on the phone or via online as well. Our library branches and the main library remain closed. However, we continue to offer, today we started offering curbside pickup. I went by the main library and they were doing a pretty good business, and I know some of the branches have been as well. Citizens may also return books at any of the branches via the drop boxes. Citizens are encouraged to continue to access social services by phone, email, and online. However, the social service offices have reopened again as of today from 8 until 5. There is, again, there are some accompanying restrictions as to how many folks will actually be able to be in the building at a particular time at social services. And when you go in, the way in which you actually work your way through the system is a little bit different than perhaps what folks are used to. So again, that is where we are right now with the reopening. We'll continue to incrementally reopen as we go along, and that will be dependent on how things are going relative to the, obviously to the virus and to what's going on in our locality as well. We alluded earlier to the Star City Strong Recovery Fund Task Force. And of course, that task force was formed just a couple of weeks ago. They have already met twice and will be meeting for the 3rd time this Wednesday. And they continue to review the funding resources that are available, as well as having a series of discussions to talk about what items they may want to recommend to council. A part of that process will be a public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing will be able both to solicit additional ideas for funding programs or initiatives, but also to help the task force understand how perhaps to best prioritize those items that they've already identified. Right now, that is scheduled for July 14th, the evening of at 7 o'clock. And we'll likely do it similar to what we're doing right now, which is staff will be present in the council chambers, and it will be some type of virtual public hearing as we go through that work. And as mentioned previously, the task force is scheduled to present their recommendations to you all on July 20th. And of course, you remember that part of the reason for the speed with which we're acting is because the funds that you actually just accepted under the budget ordinance have to be actually completely spent by the end of this calendar year. And so that is causing us to accelerate through that process. Not all of the funds that are in that program are subject to that same restriction, so there's a little more flexibility in some of it, but the CARES funding, which is the majority of the funding, is subject to that. I wanted to turn just a few moments to, we talked earlier a couple of times actually about the upcoming retreat and the strategic plan. And so I want to lay out kind of the process that we're going to be using, and this will continue to be refined over the next couple of weeks, but at least this gives folks a kind of a framework of how we're going about that update. And it is a bit different, much more involved, I think, than it has been in the past, and that is in anticipation of what I believe will be a fairly thorough and robust discussion regarding the amendment or the update to the strategic plan, perhaps more so than we've had in the past, and then ultimately how that gets incorporated into the budget. The steps that we're going to be using as a part of that framework for the update and leading us into the development of the FY22 budget really are built around 5 steps. Those steps include listening, learning, discussing, presenting, and acting. And I'll just very quickly highlight a couple of these items. And this information will slowly be placed on our website as well so that folks can access that, that information as well. The first step, as mentioned, is the listening step. And that is a step where we will be engaging in virtual conversations, which will be focus group meetings, very similar to what we did at the beginning of the Recovery Fund effort, which are focus groups consisting of folks that you all as council members select, and then each of you will lead one of those or more of those focus groups as we go through. And again, the purpose of those will be to talk about the priorities, the strategies that we currently use to advance on those priorities. So that's one step in the listening piece. Another will be key stakeholder interviews. These will be individuals that you as council members want to discuss or hear from directly individually, and we'll set up a process by which to do that. And then there will also be dedicated voicemail as well as email opportunities for folks who either are not able to participate either in the focus groups or in one of those interviews, but also want to provide their thoughts and input related to the priorities and to the strategies. All of those activities will begin the last week of July. So that's when we will initiate that effort. And again, a great deal more information will be coming out over the next week or so as to the specific scheduling and those types of activities. The second step in the process is the learning step. And that is in effect where we take the information that you gained in the listening step, which I should mention will be presented at a council meeting, very similar to what we did at the reporting out last time of the focus group meetings that we had. So you will take that information that you heard from the community around those strategies and those priorities. You will also receive information from the staff and others that relate to any types of studies or briefings or any other kind of information that may be relevant as it relates to our current strategies and priorities. And then you will use that information as a part of your, what will now be a 1.5 day long retreat. So that first day will be a half-day retreat, and its focus will be on really that learning piece, learning again from that information that we've received from the community, as well as hearing from the staff and others about the information around those strategies and priorities. And that sets the stage for the third step, which is the discussion piece, which is actually the next day, which is a full day retreat, somewhat similar to what you've engaged in previously. However, again, I think the difference this time is, whereas in the past, we probably gave somewhat cursory thought to the strategies that we use to actually deliver on the priorities, I think we'll be spending a great deal more specific time related to those strategies. We've already talked about a couple of those in this meeting today. And these would be the ways in which we actually deliver our services in the city. So if you think about it, under each of our priorities, we have a priority for economics, we have a priority for education, and so on. There is a very specific set of actions and strategies that we use in this city to deliver on those services and on those priorities that should and do differ from even our neighboring communities, because that's the way we have opted to do those things here. We will actually dig into each of those and determine which of those are strategies that we want to continue and which of those are strategies that we want to deviate from or amend or adjust. And that will be that, that second day we'll be going through that, that process. Tentatively, that retreat right now is scheduled to occur on August 27th and 28th. So when you've heard us earlier talking about August, that's the kind of date that we're looking at. Both of those days will be open to the public, obviously, as well as the media. They will be in some form, be recorded, and made, if not live, at least made available through a recording, much like we do with the meetings that we're having currently as we go forward. The fourth step is the presenting step, and that is the presenting of the strategic plan and the items that warrant further discussion. So by that point, you will have solicited engagement and comments from the public. You will have discussed those with yourselves and with the staff, and you will have presumably identified some things, again, that you want to change. And from that point forward, the work then focuses on the change part. So I'll use the example of the SRO, since that has come up previously. So if out of that effort, one of the strategies that we use, obviously, is the use of SROs and DARE officers within the schools. And if there is a desire perhaps to change that strategy, there then would be a set of, or a working group that would have a set of discussions around exactly what that change may or may not look like as you advance. Obviously, that kind of working group would include, for that item, would include the school board. It may include the superintendent. Ideally, it would include the law enforcement officials that are actually involved in serving as SROs or DARE officers, and others as you go through. But the intent is to actually, at that point, start to craft then what that amendment or change looks like. If there's a decision with any of those to ultimately remove that strategy completely, and if there are funds associated with any one of those strategies, then at that point you could start talking about what might replace that effort, where those dollars might go, for example. As you can imagine, that is going to take several meetings, and it's going to involve a great number of people. So that fourth step will actually begin shortly after the retreat. So if you think that first week in September is when you would begin those kinds of working group discussions and meetings, and they will actually run all the way through until your budget planning retreat in November. So basically all through the fall, late summer and fall, is when you'll be in those working groups actually working to craft what those new strategies may look like. And of course, along the way, there would be reporting out back to the public through briefings in front of council or by other means as we go forward as well. And then that leads to the final step, which is the acting step. And what this part ultimately deals with is really your November budget retreat. So typically we have in October a budget retreat, which is when the council gets together. By that point, the strategic plan has already been formalized. You already know what it is that you want to focus on from a strategic standpoint. And we begin providing the instructions associated with the budget that then the staff works on and developing, and then ultimately presenting to you in the subsequent spring as we go forward. In this case, we've moved that to right now, tentatively November 9th. So we've moved that to just after the elections. And the reason for that is because obviously with some folks not running for office, we know we're going to have a different council composition. And so what that will enable us to do is actually have a budget planning retreat that involves both the current council as well as the council-elect members in that discussion. The hope is obviously that minimizes disruption as we transition into January, because by that time, the staff is already well underway and working on the budget as we advance our way through. One thing I'll note between kind of that retreat, the strategic planning retreat, and the budget planning retreat, again, those working groups are working, but if along the way something becomes evident that is able to be accommodated within the current budget and that has a sense of urgency around it, we can always extract that activity or that initiative out of that process and actually act on it. So not all of the action has to wait until the budget adoption or at least the beginning of the budget process. A good example I'll give of that would be that earlier in some of the other discussions regarding law enforcement, we felt like it was appropriate and necessary, for example, to increase the transparency around our use of force policy. And we could easily accommodate that by placing it on the website and making it available for the general public. Obviously, that didn't require any kind of amendments to budgets. It didn't require any kind of action really by the council, and we took that step. That I presume that along the way with those working groups, these types of things will come out, and we'll want to move and act upon those. So this process is really intended to be responsive to the discussion that you initiated actually with your FY21 budget adoption. I think at that hearing, it was clear that you wanted to set the stage so that you could respond to some of the things that you were hearing and talking about at that point as you got into your strategic plan as well as into your budget. It really bridges kind of that call for action and frankly, the necessary bureaucratic work. And I mean bureaucratic in its positive sense here, that, you know, these are the messy parts of what it is that we do, that a lot of the things that are talked about have to actually materialize into some kind of ordinance or some kind of policy or some kind of budget amendment. And that's now where we have to transition into that discussion. It also is an intentional process that ensures that all of the voices in the community have an opportunity to be heard. That this creates a process by which folks can engage in a variety of different ways and to be able to advise you in the best way practical. And of course, the other reason for this, this deliberate process and the intentionality around it is the fact that we still remain very much in the grips of the COVID virus, which for us has still a significant impact on our local economy and therefore on our budget. And you remember from the budget adoption, it is our intent that monthly or every couple of months, I should say, we will come back with some kind of update as to how the budget is performing. And that will be a critical part of this. Is we've got to, as we begin to assess what we'll have available for the FY22 budget, need to determine how the FY21 budget, of course, is performing, which is going to be more of a challenge this year, perhaps, than it has been in the past. So those are, I just wanted to begin kind of presenting that because I know after the FY21 budget adoption discussion, there were quite a few commitments, if you will, made that we will begin talking about some of the items that were raised, and it is not that far off. I wanted to start putting some actual dates and some actual framework around what that means so that folks understand how the next steps in this process will unfold over the course really of the next year as we move forward. So again, wanted to present that to you. I know some of this, most of this has been provided to you all via separate email, but I wanted to be able to state that publicly, and I will be able to place this information out on our website over the next few days. And again, we'll continue to add more details over the next few weeks as those are developed. So that is my longer than usual report on comments, and would be happy to answer any questions you might have on that, or we can hold questions until we actually get further into this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions or comments? So you said that more details about this will be going out over the next couple of weeks. I'm especially interested in what we've reiterated over and over again for citizens to participate in this process. Can you elaborate additionally how citizens will be able to participate? I know they have the freedom to go ahead and reach out to any of us at any time about any of these priorities. But do you want to elaborate just briefly on that?
Yeah, the first step or the first opportunity for that, which will be the key opportunity, will come in the forms of those focus group discussions that you all facilitate and those individual interviews that you all will facilitate. But more importantly and more broadly will be once the voicemails are established and the email addresses are established, they will have the opportunity to look online, be able to see what information exists related to these, and then provide their thoughts and comments regarding those as well. So that will be the first, and again, that will begin at the end of July and effectively run forward until really all the way up to your retreat at the end of August. From that point forward, it is their involvement in either watching or attending the discussions that you all are having. And then as those work groups are formed later to talk about specific strategies, we'll obviously have to develop an engagement process with those. That's one of those details that will come later as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, let's move on to item number B. A couple of measures from our city attorney, Mr. Callahan. The first is the readoption and reenactment of the Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended. And we have one measure and ordinance.
Bill Bestfitch, I move the ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to readopt and reenact the Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended, and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Mr. Callahan, can you just speak briefly about anything that's been amended that's a part of this readoption and reenactment?
What this measure, Mr. Vice Mayor, is intended to do is to codify any changes in state citations that are in city code and to update our city code through this process. It's an administrative process that we do on an annual basis. We've been doing it for several years.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the ordinance passes. And item number 2, approval to reinstate, reordain, and reaffirm ordinance number 41703-032720 as supplemented by ordinance number 41709-040620. There is one measure for adoption, and that's an ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, move the ordinance.
Anita Price, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance reinstating, reordaining, and reaffirming ordinance number 41703-032720 as supplemented by ordinance number 41709-040620, establishing an effective date and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Any questions or comments? All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Davis, I'm sorry. And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the ordinance passes. Item number 8, reports of committees, there are none. Number 9, unfinished business, there is none. Number 10, introduction and consideration of ordinances and resolutions. Item A, an ordinance ratifying the declaration of June 19, 2020 as a city holiday in celebration of Juneteenth. There is an ordinance.
Ms. White Boyd, move the ordinance.
Anita Price, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance ratifying the decision of the city manager to declare June 19, 2020 as a city holiday and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Any questions or comments by council? Miss White Boyd. Trish White Boyd.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I know it's beginning to be a long day, and I hope that it would be okay for me just to read a 45-second summary of what Juneteenth means. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Liberation Day, and Emancipation Day, is a holiday celebrating the emancipation of those who had been enslaved in the United States. Originating in Texas, it is now celebrated annually on the 19th of June throughout the United States. With varying official recognition, specifically, it commemorates Union Army General Gordon Granger announcing federal orders in Galveston, Texas on June 1865, proclaiming that all slaves in Texas were free. Not just some of them, but all of them were free. So I am really excited to see this on our agenda, and I am ready to vote whenever we're ready.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Who else had a comment? Ms. Price.
Yes. Ms. White Boyd, I'm so glad you went first because that's exactly what I thought was important, to give an overview of exactly what is the true meaning of Juneteenth Day. I want to commend our city manager, Bob Cowell, for moving quickly on this and making this a citywide celebration and recognition. This really, I think, goes without any doubt that Roanoke tries so very hard to be progressive, to be inclusive, and to recognize the kinds of sentiments that we're seeing nationwide. And I do think it's important to just acknowledge the fact that Juneteenth Day has been recognized in the city by various organizations. Most recently, our NAACP youth did a peaceful rally on Juneteenth. And SCLC has also done many recognitions of Juneteenth Day. So I just think, I just want to say I'm so very proud of the progressive attitude and work that we're doing to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Mr. Bestfitch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. And just to piggyback a little bit on the last part of Ms. Price's remarks, I just want to give a personal shout out to Jeff Artis, who is one who has taken the lead on that Juneteenth celebration in Booker T. Washington Park many, many years. And of course, it didn't happen this year, just like a lot of other things are not happening. But I also hope that this is not going to be a once and off decision as far as the city of Roanoke is concerned. As we move through this process we've been talking about this afternoon of doing strategic planning and budgeting and so forth, you know, we really need to look at our paid holidays. There is a budget implication there, and we really need to decide how many holidays we can have on the calendar and whether there are some that currently are observed that perhaps don't need to be observed or maybe not as important as something like this. And if I understand correctly, the state has also made Election Day a state holiday now. And so I think that that's another one that we need to give serious consideration to and decide what our holiday should be, not just for 2020, but going forward year after year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Cowell, is it my understanding that that conversation will come to us this fall?
That is correct. When we have the official adoption, and just as a reminder, in addition to the holidays that we recognize on that calendar, we also establish floating holidays as well, that where the offices stay open, but employees can choose how they ultimately use those. So that'll be part of the discussion as well.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the ordinance passes. Item number B, an ordinance creating the Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board. There is an ordinance.
So Bestfitch, I move the ordinance.
Price, second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance amending and reordaining section 2.282, mayor as ex officio member of committees, Division 1, generally. Article 14, authorities, boards, commissions, and committees generally. Chapter 2, administration, Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended. Amending and reordaining the title of Division 2, permanent committees, Article 14, authorities, boards, commissions, and committees generally. Chapter 2, administration, Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended. And sections 2-297 of Division 2, permanent committees, Article 14, authorities, boards, commissions, and committees generally. Chapter 2, administration, Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended. Amending and reordaining Division 2, permanent committees, Article 14, authorities, boards, commissions, and committees generally. Chapter 2, administration, Code of the City of Roanoke, 1979, as amended, to add sections 2-305, establishing an effective date and dispensing with the second reading of this ordinance by title.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by council?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I would like to share a few comments about why we need an Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board. Our updated comprehensive plan, City Plan 2040, includes 6 guiding themes: livable built environment, harmony with nature, resilient economy, healthy community, responsible regionalism, and interwoven equity. The plan identifies priorities, policies, and actions for each of the themes, and we have people and activities in place within the city staff and in partnership with other agencies and organizations to advance the plan's recommendations for the first 5 themes: building, natural environment, economic development, health, and regionalism. And as I noted on June 15th, we do not have staff or activities to implement a specific program to ensure that interwoven equity is more than a concept in a document that sits on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. Establishing this board is especially important in light of the resolution we adopted this afternoon to express our intent to remove the Lee Monument. While that action is extremely important, it is almost entirely symbolic. Removing the monument will not do one thing to ensure equity or promote empowerment. If removing the monument is all we do, we are simply paying lip service to the need to overcome the impact of 4 centuries of white privilege for some and the denial of equality and opportunity for others. Having just celebrated the 244th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, we still struggle to demonstrate that we truly believe that we all are created equal. Many of us still want to deny that people of color are forced to wonder every day whether their lives matter, not because they've done anything wrong, but simply because of the color of their skin. We have yet to fully acknowledge that racism is not just about individual acts of prejudice and discrimination. It is about a system of policies and practices that deny the full rights and privileges of American citizenship to anyone who does not fit the culture's definition of the norm, sometimes unspoken, but always present. This board faces enormous challenges that it will not resolve overnight. It's not a task force or a work group that can complete its assignment in a matter of weeks, months, or even years. It will be a permanent body appointed by this council to review the priorities for interwoven equity in City Plan 2040 and any subsequent city comprehensive plans, develop proposed plans for the implementation of the policies and actions identified for each priority, review all existing city policies and regulations, and recommend to council changes that are necessary to rid our institution of policies and procedures that promote inequity and limit empowerment. I believe that is long past time for America, in the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to live out the true meaning of its creed. The belief in equality, in liberty, and in justice for all has always been an aspiration, an unrealized ideal. Today, we must ask ourselves, are we worthy of that challenge? Can we create the America that we are meant to be? can this nation that came out of many nations truly become one people, united in mutual respect and strengthened by the diversity that makes us unique in all the world. In Roanoke, I believe that we can. It will not be easy. We will make mistakes along the way. And we will keep moving forward until we can assure equity and promote empowerment for all of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. Any additional comments, questions? All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the ordinance passes. Item number C, a resolution appointing Dr. Brenda L. Hale as the member of the Star City Strong Recovery Fund Task Force. There is a resolution.
Ms. White Boyd, move the resolution.
Michelle Davis, second.
Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution affirming the appointment of Dr. Brenda L. Hale as a member of the Star City Strong Recovery Fund Task Force.
Any questions or comments? And Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Item number D, a resolution appointing Cecilia T. Webb as Deputy City Clerk. There is a resolution.
Mr. Vice Mayor, before we move to item D, do we need to waive the residency requirement under item 10C? I don't believe that Brenda Hale resides within the city limits.
She does not.
Okay.
I would move to waive the residency requirement for that appointment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to waive the residential requirement. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the amendment or the motion to waive residency is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. Item 10D, a resolution appointing Cecilia T. Webb as Deputy City Clerk. There is a resolution.
Anita Price gladly move the resolution.
Michelle Davis, second.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution appointing Cecilia T. Webb as Deputy City Clerk effective June 30, 2020.
Any questions or comments by council?
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Callahan.
I suggest a technical correction to the title paragraph of the resolution. It should read a resolution consenting to the appointment of Cecilia T. Webb as Deputy Clerk effective June 30, 2020. This should be a motion.
All right, is there a motion to amend? Is
Ms. White Boyd moved for the amendment.
there a second?
Second.
All right, there is a motion to amend and a second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd,
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye, and the motion to amend is approved. And now we need a motion to amend.
To adopt the resolution as amended.
Yeah.
To adopt the resolution as
There
amended.
we go.
All right, what he said.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
She should read the title first.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title paragraph?
Yes. A resolution
Consent.
consenting to the appointment of Cecilia T. Webb as Deputy City Clerk, effective June 30, 2020.
Cecilia, we are not going to make this easy for you. All right, any other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Boyd?
Aye.
Bestfitch?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Khan.
Aye, and the amended resolution passes. Congratulations, CC.
Yay!
And I'm feeling like we need a resolution to commend Ms. McCoy for her guidance through all of this today. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your diligence and your hard work today, and to everyone there.
Thank you.
Item 11, motions and miscellaneous business, inquiries and or comments by members of council. I'll start with Mr. Bestfitch, and we'll work down to Ms. Whiteboy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I do have two items today. One is to let everyone know that our friend Mayor Francois Briere of the city of Saint-Lô, France, one of our 7 sister cities around the globe, was not successful in his bid for another term as mayor. The new mayor of Saint-Lô is Emmanuel Lejeune. That's the best I can do in French. I do much better in German. She is the first female mayor of Saint-Lô, and the president of Roanoke Valley Sister Cities, Mary Jo Fassier, has drafted a letter for our mayor to send, congratulating her, and of course stressing that we want to continue our great relationship between the people of the city of Roanoke and the people of Saint-Lô. And I emailed that this morning, and the mayor said, sounds good. So I think that'll probably be in the mail in the next few days. And then secondly, to let everybody know that July 30 is celebrated as International Day of Friendship. It's been celebrated annually since 2011 on July 30, created in the hopes that fostering friendship among different people, cultures, and countries will inspire peace throughout the world. The United Nations also wanted to create a day that taught today's youth the importance of diversity and to promote understanding among different cultures. In some countries, it is celebrated on August 2, and there it's often known as World Friendship Day, International Friendship Day, or simply Friendship Day. I think probably all of us know people who live in other countries, or we know people who live in our country who came from some other country. And so I just wanted to put a little bug in your ears to reach out sometime during this month, you know, whether it be an email or a note in the mail or whatever, to kind of reach out to those contacts that we have personally with people in other countries or people who have come from other countries, to let them know that we value their friendship. Thank
you, Mr. Bestfitch. Ms. Davis? Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Price?
The only thing I would like to just kind of reinforce is to just really impress upon our citizens everywhere the importance that we're going to continue to fight this battle on COVID, that it is so imperative that we remember not just the social distancing, but please wear a mask. It may not be a state mandated or even city mandated as of now, but I do think it is so important that we remember the health of all of our citizens. And as we've heard from so many people, how important it is to follow those guidelines, good hand washing, social distancing, and wear a mask. Wearing a seatbelt is something that is mandated for safety. Wearing a shirt and shoes when you go into a restaurant. These are safety precautions. And I just think it is so imperative that we all think of each other in friendship Take care of one another, look after one another, and wear your mask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Ms. White.
Miss Trish is good.
Trish.
I want to echo everything Ms. Price just said about the mask. I was going to say something about that, but since she already said that, I will publicly acknowledge one of our icons, Miss Evelyn Bethel, who passed away on Tuesday, for all of her hard work for this community and all of the causes that she has championed, and my sincere condolences to her family. And that would be all for me, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Ms. Davis.
All right, it's been a long day. I just remembered I do have one thing that I need to express extreme gratitude for, and that's on behalf of Boys and Girls Club. We had a tremendous outpouring of support this year for the 4 on the 4th race. So we, as you all know, most 4th of July events were canceled. We were very uncertain. This has been running or walking the morning of the 4th of July with your family starting in downtown Roanoke has become a tradition for a lot of families. And the race sold out last year, and we were very uncertain as to how we were going to do this year. But I did just find out earlier today that we exceeded the number of registered runners this year in a virtual format. So everybody did it safely. They did it in their own. We had 15 different states represented, so you didn't even have to be in the state of Virginia to participate. But I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to everybody who chose to stay safe this 4th of July weekend. I know it has been unusual for a lot of us to be celebrating with just our small nuclear families and not in large gatherings. But as we see COVID cases rising across the country, I continue to be grateful for friends and family who are thinking about those who are more vulnerable than possibly we are, and are choosing to protect them through their own personal choices and safety measures as well. So thank you for everyone in the support during these unusual times. It was just a real joy to see everybody coming out and racing virtually. So hopefully we'll have everybody all together again next year.
Thank you all. Just three quick things. For any parents or guardians in the Roanoke City School District, I encourage you all to complete the online survey that the Transition and Restoration Task Force is requesting. This input is critical to our new superintendent, to our school board, as they continue to work on developing a meaningful plan for reopening. Along those lines, if you've not had an opportunity to meet the new superintendent, Ms. Verlita White, she is continuing her walking tours or meet and greets tomorrow at a couple of different locations. Those locations are on the rcps.info website. I also want to extend sympathy to another icon of our community, in the business community as well as the swimming community, and that's Mr. Lewis Tudor, who died this past week. We extend our sympathy to his family and to all of those who have been touched by his life and his biscuits at Tudor's Biscuit World. And finally, commendations to the Taubman Museum of Art. They reopened on Friday so that citizens across the region can see the incredible exhibit celebrating the 100th, the centennial of Dorothy Gillespie's birth. And there are some extraordinary exhibits of her work in the museum, as well as a map, driving map. You can see the work that she has up throughout the city, as well as the Blue Ridge region. So on that note, we will go into recess. We are going to stand in recess for a closed meeting, and I'm going to ask council to reconvene in 10 minutes on our closed meeting call. And Dan, do you have any, Mr. Callahan, do you have any additional instructions for us?
I sent out the call access information this morning, so you should have that. If you don't have it, raise your hand, I'll send it again.
I think we all have it. So we will we'll reconvene in our closed meeting at 5:45. All right?
And then we'll come back here to certify and.
Thank you.
Mayor, you can call the meeting back to order.
Thank you, Dan. As we come back to order, I need a motion to bring us out of closed meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I'll read that certification. I move that each member of Roanoke City Council certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, that one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37 of Title 2.2 Code of Virginia, Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion of which the closed meeting conduct through electronic communication means was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Ms. Davis? Davis?
It is an aye. Thank you.
And Mayor Lee?
Aye, and thank you all. Now, we want to place some names in nomination. I'll call on Councilman Bestfitch to give us the names of the people that were either appointed or want to be reappointed.
Mr. Mayor, for the Architecture Review Board, the nominee to replace Mr. Fulton is Hussein B. Alam, and the renomination for another term is Drew Kepley. On the Board of Trustees, City of Roanoke Pension Plan, the nominees are Mark Nelson, David Jevons, and Clarence Turpin. For the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals, the nominee is India Miller. For the Mill Mountain Advisory Board, the reappointment for another term of Jeffrey Todd. For the Roanoke Public Library, reappointment of Aurelise Quintana. And for Virginia's First Regional Industrial Facilities Authority, the elected official member is Council Member Juna Osborne. That's all the nominees for today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. I will ask our clerk to call the roll, and in doing so, if you're in favor of those names just mentioned by Mr. Bestfitch, please let it be known by the saying of all nominees. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Price?
All nominees.
Ms. White Boyd? Ms. White Boyd, you're on mute.
All nominees, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Bestfitch?
All nominees.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
All nominees.
Ms. Davis?
All nominees.
And Mayor Lee?
All nominees. Thank you all. All right, if there's no further business to come before the council, and I'm always looking for a Dan out the corner of my eye on this one. I said no further business. But thank you, Vice Mayor Cobb, for stepping in for me when I had to go out to do council business. It was council business. But thank you for doing that on short notice. All right, there being no further business set forth to come before the council, this regular session of City Council is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for your work today. Take care.